because it's nice and cool. But hopefully you all had a chance to enjoy the weather. All right, can we have a roll call, please? Oh, sorry, wait, before we do that, we have two council members who requested to be excused for tonight's meeting, Latricia and Amy.
I move to excuse Councilmember Miller and Councilmember Suggs from tonight's meeting.
Second.
All right, we have a motion to excuse. Anyone opposed to the motion, please state your opposition. All right, hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. So Carrie, if we can have a roll call, please.
Mayor Dexter.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Carr.
Here.
Councilmember Schwimmen Warren.
I'm here virtual, calling in from Washington, D.C., where it felt like 93 degrees today.
Councilmember Schwab.
Here.
Assistant Deputy City Manager Goings.
Present.
Attorney Bloor.
I'm here.
Thank you.
All right, so it is a little bit light this evening, but we do have a quorum, so we will proceed with our business. Are there any late items from staff? Oh yeah, sorry, skipping right ahead. If you can please stand as you are able for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right. That was an important part, not to skip. Are there late items from staff?
Mayor, there are no late items from staff.
All right. Any late items from council? Okay, no late items from council, so we'll go on to public comment. Let me wait for the list real quick. If you are joining us virtually and wish to make a public comment, please raise your virtual hand. We will see it and I will call on you. We will do council chambers first and then go to online. So we will start with my list here. So Sam Grello, you're up first.
Good evening. My name is Sam Grello, and I'm the Executive Director of the Port Angeles Waterfront District. In January of this year, the Waterfront District entered into a contract with the City of Port Angeles to perform tasks and implement programs and services within the Parking Business Improvement Area, which is also referred to as the PBIA. One of the programs the city mandated the Waterfront District participate in as part of this contract was to enroll in the Washington Main Street program as an official Main Street community. The Waterfront District became a Main Street affiliate earlier this spring, which is a required step in becoming an official Main Street community. We are currently applying to become an official Main Street community to be admitted into the program in 2026. As part of our application, we need a letter of support from our local municipality, y'all. There are many benefits to Port Angeles having a Main Street community. The Main Street brand is well known throughout the country and connotes positive downtown vibrancy. This designation will help everyone's efforts as our community strives to attract new residents, businesses, and visitors. Main Street also has a great tax incentive program that will help fund our organization and make us less reliant on unpredictable grant cycles for operations. Thank you for considering to support this letter of support request. I will be available for questions when we discuss this issue later in the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. I did forget for those who aren't regular, please state your name and whether or not you're a resident. That's fine. You're representing your employer. And we have one person on the list who would be at the second public comment period. First public comment period is items on tonight's agenda. So we'll go next to Roxanne Greason.
Hello, my name is Roxanne Greason. I am a resident, but I'm here speaking on behalf of the Port Angeles Arts Council. I'm here to express our strong support for the designation of the Port Angeles Waterfront District as a Washington State Main Street community. As the local Arts Council, we work closely with artists, designers, creative entrepreneurs, and community-based organizations. In recent years, we have seen significant progress in revitalizing the downtown core, a growing number of creative placemaking efforts, both of which have contributed to a renewed sense of pride and investment in the downtown area. The formation and leadership of the Port Angeles Waterfront District Organization has played a key role in catalyzing this transformation. The Main Street Community designation will offer critical tools and incentives to sustain and expand this progress. In particular, the Main Street Tax Incentive Program and related technical support will enhance our community's ability to implement long-term improvements that benefit residents, visitors, and local businesses alike. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to Mimi Smith.
Mimi Smith, City of Port Angeles. I see tonight that we've got council budget goals, which include finding new ways to try to tax us more and make us spend more. And I really understand that it's fun to spend other people's money. And I know it's fun to have really new and shiny things. But the Kubota tractor I see is back on the consent agenda. I don't understand why we need to replace something with top of the line, what was it, $48,000, with something that's only used about 4 hours a week during the summers. I talked to a number of different Kubota repair guys today, and they can't imagine how any Kubota is so bad off with only 1,200 hours to require $30,000 of repairs. It seems, I mean, it's possible. You know, the one thing that was suggested is maybe it's been left out in the rain and rain got into the engine block and it cracked. But other than that, that still wouldn't cost $30,000. A new engine, a crate engine's only $6,000 with a $2,000 core charge on it. So this sounds made up. I don't see enough information on that one page. I'd like to see pictures. I'd like to see, you know, justification why the equipment's not being kept care of. I don't see if it's only used for 1,200 hours in 20 years, why we're buying a new piece of equipment. We should be buying a used piece of equipment. But what this comes down to is, it is fun to spend other people's money, but the city council should not allow the city to spend our money so quickly, and especially for something that seems so superfluous. There's no reason we need to have this equipment if it's only used 4 hours a week during the summer. You know, we should buy bottom of the line. We should buy used. We should fix what we have. We should keep up what we have. I'd really like to see how this is stored, how it's maintained. And honestly, we're way too free with our money. And that's up to you guys. You need to start saying no. And this is something that needs to be said no to. Thank you.
Thank you, Mimi. Caleb. Guess I should say Caleb McMahon. I don't know everyone in the room, and there could have been another Caleb.
Good evening. I'm Caleb McMahon, and I am a Port Angeles resident. But I'm here tonight on behalf of the Waterfront District. First of all, I'd like to thank you all for your continued support for our organization in our downtown revitalization efforts. Your partnership has been instrumental in helping us build momentum that we have. Tonight, I'm here to ask for your support once again as we apply to become part of the Washington Main Street program. This designation would open the door to valuable resources, training, and statewide collaboration that will strengthen our ability to serve downtown businesses, property owners, and the broader community. The Waterfront District is committed to creating a vibrant, thriving downtown that reflects the identity and spirit of Port Angeles. Being part of the Main Street network would help us do that more effectively and more sustainably. We deeply appreciate the city's ongoing support, and we hope you'll continue in helping us move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, anyone else in council chambers? John, come on down. This is for items on tonight's agenda.
Yep. Hi, John Ralston, City of Port Angeles resident. Thanks for having a cool, comfortable location this evening. I'm going to comment about the tractor per se. called a family member that's a regular operator of equipment, big, small, et cetera, regularly have more than 1,600 hours of use on their equipment. But it's 1,600 hours of use over 20 years. That's 80 hours a year. It just seems funny that there's $30,000 worth of repairs, and that's, I guess, the justification that somebody might say it needs to be repaired. I understand you're going to approve it, no doubt about it. The other item I'm going to talk about, nobody's heard me talk about bicycle situations before. It's J1 on your agenda. It's unbelievable that there's a $2 million grant, I'm rounding, to put bicycle paths or potential bicycle paths off of A Street onto 10th all the way to I and on 12th all the way to I, et cetera. $2 million. I realize it's a grant. I would say the same thing to the state of Washington, who's struggling financially to award $2 million for this. I have two acquaintances that bicycle over 1,000 miles a year. They think it's nuts that you're considering using these things as bike paths. Again, I say, why? Does it get us bonus points for other grants within the city? It's nuts. The only place I see bicycling happening on a regular basis is on the Olympic Discovery Trail. $2 million of spending on that be well worth it. But on this, I wouldn't spend another nickel. It takes time away from staff, and at the same time, our staff, according to what I see, is under stress. Please walk away from this. Makes no sense whatsoever. Additionally, what kind of account do you have for people that are bicycling now on 8th, 10th, 12th, Front Street, First Street, and all the other places that bicycle paths are put in? I'm not opposed to bicycle paths, but most bicyclists that I know want to avoid traffic unless it's a path that's separated from automobiles. And the only one in Port Angeles is Olympic Discovery Trail. Excuse me, and Ray Street.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. Anyone? Yeah, but your item is not on tonight's agenda, so you'll be at the second public comment period. Yeah, thank you for your patience.
Part of the budget.
Okay, that's fine then. James, and then we'll go to Mr. Brown.
Hi, James Taylor, live in Port Angeles. I mentioned last time we met that there wasn't a single mention of cutting any expenses in the budget. I'm going to call it the big, beautiful budget, because it just feels like it's, we want more, we want more, we want more. So I did a little unofficial poll as I walked campaigning and talking to people. And I asked them, how many of you want to have your property taxes raised 2.25% per thousand? And I got 0. And I said, well, how many of you want to pay an additional sales tax? And I got 0. And there was one other one in there. How many want to pay higher utilities? And I got 0. And you guys represent the people of this community, and I think you will find the same results I did. The people of this community feel strapped. We talk about, these AMIs. I'm retired. I'm down there at 75% AMI or something. And yet you feel that you need more money from me so that you can pay for toys like tractors that don't need to get replaced or cars that aren't beyond service life. And so I'm sitting here thinking, as a city council, I would direct the city that the service life of a pickup is, let's say 125K rather than 63. one of them we replaced last year. And maybe I would suggest, hey, maybe we buy the Ford Maverick rather than the top of the line Ford. You know, just little stuff. You know, I see we need a part-timer here and a part-timer here. Did you have 2 or 3 part-timers in this budget? I forget. But that job function should be assigned to someone you already have. I think, you know, if it's important, someone can pick that task up, and maybe they need to offload, you know, 10% of their job load. But just sit here and say, oh, we need another staff person to manage, what was it, the vacant property bill? We're looking at, oh, we're gonna monitor, database all the vacant properties, and we need a half-time employee to do it. You know, at some point, you're gonna break this down. I had a senior citizen who's prominent in this community said she's gonna have to leave here because we have uncontrolled spending and she can't afford to live here. Anyway, fun times. Thanks.
Thank you, James. Mr. Brown?
Steve Brown. I live at 622 South Valley Street. I'm here because it is budget time. Well, I suppose I should disclose I have a son that's a City of Port Angeles police officer. Concerning user fees, it's probably been a year and a half that you've increased your yard waste user fees. When I first started taking pickup loads of limbs and prunings, the cashiers would warn me off and point out that it's cheaper to dump garbage than it is to dump yard waste. A pickup load of limbs and prunings can easily cost $150. I know because I paid it. Fortunately, I do have other alternatives. I have somebody in the county where I can take it and it can be burned. But of course, we really don't want to do that. But I'm asking you to take a look at your user fees, because it's not just yard waste user fees. I got a bill here for my right-of-way use permit that increased 265%, not 50%, not 25%, from $215 to $570 and some odd cents. That is 265%, and that just happened this year. Please, take a look at your user fees. You are gouging your citizens. That's all I got.
Thank you. All right, we have 3 comments online, so we will go to them. We'll start with Christina Parker. And I will make sure that we can hear you, and then we will start your time. I also need to get my timer ready. There we go.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Christina Parker. I am a resident. I'm here to voice my strong support for the Waterfront District's application to join the Washington Main Street program. Personally, I run a local marketing company that works with small businesses, events, and organizations throughout PA. And we are also a part of the downtown Port Angeles Waterfront District. As a marketing company, I've seen personally just how powerful good branding, storytelling, and community marketing can be for helping small businesses grow and bring energy to the downtown area. I know, or I feel that being a part of the Main Street program is going to strengthen our efforts and provide even more support. It's not just about the buildings, it's about investing in our small businesses, our community identity, and our future, which the city already does an amazing job with. So thank you so much for that. I ask today that you please vote yes on the application. I know it's going to be a big step in the right direction for our city. Thank you for your continuing support and strengthening our business and community.
Thank you, Christina. All right, we'll go to Stephen Paleo.
Okay, can you hear me?
We can, go ahead.
Excellent. So Stephen Paleo, I own a couple businesses in the city of Port Angeles. I just want to echo Sam and Caleb's comments regarding Port Angeles' application for the Main Street program. We've all seen how the Main Street program has worked in other Washington communities. In Port Townsend, it's helped restore historic spaces, attract new businesses, and create year-round foot traffic. In Wenatchee, it led to public-private partnerships that revitalized the public market area. In Ellensburg, the Main Street program helped reduce the downtown vacancies and supported a surge in new restaurants, shops, and cultural events that now draw visitors from across the region. These are all success stories that we can learn from and build upon here in Port Angeles. I also want to remind you of the hard facts. You know, we've seen lodging taxes just reported down 29% year over year for the last month and down 25% for the last 3 months on a year over year comparable basis. I suspect we're probably going to be down 15 to 20% for all of calendar 2025 for lodging taxes. We've also seen sales tax collections underperform other regions, similar towns in the last decade. In fact, we declined in 2024 when areas such as Sequim saw growth last year. So the Main Street brand itself really does carry some weight. It tells the world that Port Angeles is a vibrant, growing community, the kind of place where people want to live, start a business, and visit. I hope you'll support and vote to support this application. I think it's an investment in our shared future. That's it for me. Take care.
Thank you, Stephen. All right, and Susie Blake.
Hello.
Hello, go ahead. We can hear you.
Susie Blake, Port Angeles resident. I just wanted to speak regarding some of the budget items in strong opposition to the idea that we need a new taxing district. I look at that and I can only think that everyone involved with that proposal either has a trust fund or is independently wealthy, because you're killing the working class of this community and driving seniors out of their homes. And the propaganda has already started with the pro-tax agenda to weave the narrative that we must support, you know, fire and EMT as if they haven't already been in the budget every year. And I support their work, but you need to take a hard look at the drug issues that you're not addressing and the drug issues that the county fosters and expands, and how that impacts the EMT and police needs. You can't just keep taxing people to death. You're taxing the working class out of this community and making it impossible for people to live. Thanks.
Thank you, Susie. All right, anyone else before we move on? John, go ahead.
My name is John Hamilton. I'm a Port Angeles resident and I'm a high school teacher. I want to thank you for your continued work navigating the difficult financial landscape. Tonight's discussion on budget amendment number 2 and the 2026 goals that highlight declining property and sales tax revenues while contract applications, inflation continue to rise. As a union leader and educator, I understand how budgeting during constraint requires clarity, foresight, and community buy-in. I encourage you to provide clear frameworks for how project priorities will be evaluated, especially in light of deferred maintenance cost concerns and rising utility costs. I also want to support the city's continued partnership with the Department of Ecology through the Pollution Prevention Assistance Program. This aligns directly with the community's concerns about the Rainier Mill cleanup. While the cleanup isn't on tonight's agenda, the July 22nd meeting provides a crucial opportunity for this council to take a public stand on enforcement, transparency, and long-term ecological resilience. I encourage council to advocate for climate-tested solutions and inclusive community oversight as the project advances. Finally, I'm concerned by the housing activity noted in tonight's June 2025 housing report. Just 2 single-family permits were issued in June, and there's no reported movement in small or medium-scale infill projects, despite this being a stated council priority. I respectfully urge you to revisit whether current incentives, permitting processes, and public-private strategies are effective in delivering affordable housing for local workers and families, especially those in public service and small business. Thank you again for your work on behalf of the city. I look forward to continuing to support Port Angeles as both a public servant and an engaged community member.
Thank you. Anyone else before we move on for first public comment? Okay, then we will move on to the consent agenda. Is there anything anyone would like to pull from the consent agenda? Drew?
Yeah, I'd like to pull item E4, the equipment purchase for the replacement of the Parks Department equipment, 5330.
All right, we will move that to we'll make that item J2 under contracts and purchasing. Anything anyone wants to add? Go ahead, Navarra.
Yes, I'll go one by one. I have 3 I'd like to add, just so that Lindsay can weigh in online if there's an issue, if that's okay, Mayor. Okay, the first one is I3, Washington State Main Street Program Letter of Support for the Port Angeles Waterfront District. Okay.
Any opposition? No. Okay, I also do not oppose.
The second one is I4, recognition of the Sister City Pact between the cities of Mutsu and Port Angeles.
I see a thumbs up from Lindsay, thumbs up from Drew, and I'm also a thumbs up.
And the third one is J1, 10th Street Bike Boulevard.
All right, any opposition to that? No. Okay. All right, John was right about that one. Okay, so we have the City Council minutes of July 1st, 2025, expenditure report from June 21st, 2025 to July 4th, 2025 in the amount of $3,870,448.36. Street pavement repair contract 2025-24 final acceptance. Airport electrical conduit boring final acceptance contract 2025-02. Pollution prevention program interagency agreement acceptance 2025 to 2027. Washington Main Street Program Letter of Support for the Port Angeles Waterfront District, recognition of the Sister City Pact between the cities of Mutsu and Port Angeles, and the 10th Street Bike Boulevard Professional Services Agreement PSA-2025-14. Any comments, questions, or a motion to approve? Navarro, go ahead.
I would just like to briefly say that I really appreciate all of the people who spoke in favor of us providing a letter of support for the Port Angeles Main Street program, Waterfront District Main Street program. I think it's a really exciting time for us and an exciting opportunity. So with that, I make a motion to approve the consent agenda as read.
Second.
All right, Lindsay, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to speak to the Bike Boulevard project. Bike boulevards are not bike lanes and they're not lane separated bike paths. Instead, they are different traffic control measures to turn a street into a street that is easier for bicycles to safely travel down, and basically deprioritized for cars. It's really popular in Vancouver, BC. I think that's where I first saw bike boulevards, and it's hard to describe without experiencing it. So I hope the community will bear with the planning process, and I expect and hope that there will be opportunities for comment as we start to see some of the design of what that could look like. If it's something we don't want as a community, we can always get to some design phase and stop. But I think it's the right thing to do to make it easier to bike through the large part of West Port Angeles, the west side. Thanks.
Thank you, Lindsay. All right. So we have a motion to approve the consent agenda as read. Anyone opposed, please state your opposition. All right, hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. And we will move on to the budget amendment, which is not the budget discussion. So item G1. Serena, go ahead.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, City Council. So this next item is the first reading to the second amendment to the 2025 budget. This amendment primarily consists of items that have been already approved by City Council that were adjustments to the 2025 budget that occurred during that adoption of the 2026 to 2031 Capital Facilities and Transportation Improvement Plan. So the majority of what you see there are just those adjustments to keep the budget in alignment with that. In addition, this amendment does include some revenue from our building permit area for higher than expected permit revenue that we are seeing for 2025 year to date. We do expect to see that continue over the next number of years. And so we are including in this amendment to tie that to the community development technician position that's currently temporarily funded in the 2025 budget. So that would create this position as a permanent addition to the city's budget. And of note, it's important for council to recall that those funds are restricted and must be used towards expenses essentially in the building permit department. And so it is an appropriate use of that funding. And so we are looking for council to conduct the first reading of the 2025 budget amendment number 2 ordinance and to continue this item to the August 19th council meeting. And I'm available for any questions you may have.
All right, thank you. I'll go ahead and read it and then ask for questions. An ordinance of the City of Port Angeles, Washington, amending the city's 2025 budget for the second time. Are there comments or questions from council? Okay, I will just make a quick comment that I'm pleased to see that we're able to. I've heard a lot of good things about the over-the-counter permitting and how much people appreciate that. So I'm really grateful that we're able to, with the revenues that we have, make that a full-time position. I think that's really valuable and reinforces people saying, hey, I'd like to be able to do that. And what if you work on Tuesday and you can't ever come on Tuesday? Now you can come on Thursday or when that happens. That position can be full-time, I think is good. So that's the only thing I have for tonight. If we don't have anything else from council, we can discuss it again at our second meeting of November. Well, it'll be the only meeting. I mean, August, good gracious. We're not going to wait till November. Sorry. It's way too hot to think it's fall. Our second meeting of August, which is the only meeting of August, but we will discuss it then. All right. So that brings us to a presentation on the National Night Out from our Deputy Chief. Yes. They called it a presentation. I don't know if you feel it is a presentation or just a little update, some information.
I think update would be appropriate. Good evening. I just wanted to remind everyone that we are bringing National Night Out back to Port Angeles. National Night Out won't just be happening in Port Angeles. It's happening all across the United States of America, but it will be happening here Tuesday, August 5th, from about 4 to 8:30-ish. Or whenever the movie ends. This will be at Civic Field parking lot. And this is an opportunity across the country for people to get to know the police officers that work in their community, to establish some old-fashioned professional relationships between citizens and police officers, and so that people can see us other than when we go flying by in our cars en route to a 911 call. But this is a special time set aside, and it's not just happening here. Like I said, it's happening all across the country. But here on Tuesday, August 5th, at Civic Field, in case I didn't already mention that, from about 4 p.m. to the end of the movie, we'll have the PAPD K9, a dunk tank, some yard games. The movie is Zootopia. Forgive me, I don't know a whole lot about that movie. There will be some music. I understand there will be some food trucks there where people can purchase food. There might even be ice cream. And some booths and just agencies that have confirmed, or Port Angeles PD, of course. The Sheriff's Office will be there. We've invited our friends from the fire department to come as well. It wouldn't be the same without them. Elwha PD will be there, and PENCOM will be there too. And I'm glad to hear that they're going to be there. A lot of people maybe forget the folks in the comm center that answer the phone when people call 911 and talk on the radio to us so that we know where the emergency is located. And so that will be Tuesday, August 5th, from about 4 to 8:30 p.m. or the end of the movie at Civic Field parking lot. And I apologize if that doesn't rise to the level of a presentation, but that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So you can go vote in the primary and then go down to the Civic Field parking lot for some fun. Thank you, Jason. All right. Next we have oh, yes, go ahead. Go ahead, Lindsay.
I might be mistaken on the schedule, but I believe August 5th is the last day of the paddle journey. And I believe that's the night that Lower Alaklam Tribe will be doing protocol. I plan to be there. I apologize. It sounds like there's a schedule conflict. Why are we doing this on the same night as this historic event in our community?
Well, it's a nationally scheduled event, so it just unfortunately locally sounds like there's a conflict with that
And we're
with that
pulling
event.
resources from the tribe on that day.
Well, they've been invited. I don't know. That's up to them.
Sorry,
They-
point of order, Mayor. That was a question for our staff.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
The information that I have is that Elwha PD was invited and they've confirmed that they will be there.
All right, I guess I'll just say, just because it's a national night doesn't mean that our local events and what happens locally, respecting Indigenous culture, doesn't take precedent. So we could always do a different night. It sounds like this event's already fully planned. I don't expect it to change. I'm not asking for that. But I hope that in the future, we can look at, the billboards on the main street of town and see what's happening in our community and understand the priority we should put to the paddle journey that hasn't happened here in 20 years. Thanks.
Thank you, Lindsay. All right, we will move on to item I2, and that is maybe a presentation. Nothing against the deputy chief, by Courtney Bornsworth, and Paul Forrest is here with her on the City Shade Street Trees program.
Thank you, Mayor Dexter, for that introduction. Tonight, I'll be giving a 5-minute presentation on the City Shade Street Tree program, specifically focusing on some updates for the 2025 program. I ask that you please hold your questions until the end. Thank you. Next slide. I'll start by going over the program overview, including past distributions from 2023 and 2024, concluding with some changes that we can expect for this year's program. Next slide. The City Shade Street Tree program was originally founded by community member Paul Forrest, who saw a need for a more diverse tree canopy throughout the city's residential streets. The program was developed in partnership with the city to assist with the financial hurdles associated with purchasing and installing street trees throughout town. Trees were cultivated in a volunteer-led nursery over a 5-year period of time before the first tree distribution took place in 2023, followed by the second in 2024. Next slide. The program was designed to be specific to Port Angeles city limits, but it is not exclusive to homeowners only. Individuals who rent are not excluded from this program. They simply need landowner agreement to participate. In the past, applicants were able to apply for up to 4 free trees each year. The maintenance of the tree is the responsibility of the applicant. This includes planting and watering during our dry summer months for at least the first 2 years through establishment. For those who are unable to plant their tree, we did offer volunteers to assist with that effort. Next slide. In 2023, a total of 140 trees were distributed, including the golden rain tree, the English oak, and the Japanese pagoda tree. In 2024, a total of 177 trees were distributed, including the Gary oak, scarlet oak, and katsura tree. As mentioned before, these trees were cultivated over a 5-year period of time off-site, volunteer-led nursery to prepare for these distributions. This year, applicants may apply for up to 2 trees now through August 8th. Preference will be given to applicants who have not received a tree or trees in the past. Staff will do a review of each application that will include identifying the best suited species for each location, ensuring that the program is not exclusive of those locations that may have overhead or underground utilities. All trees distributed must be planted within the right-of-way. As part of this review process, staff will indicate the best location for the trees to be installed and will do follow-up inspections this winter to ensure the trees have been planted properly and in the correct location. The trees this year differ from those in the past in that they are field grown and are significantly larger in size, meaning that they will require a larger planting hole to be dug. We will still be offering volunteer assistance for this effort. The increased size and better root structure compared to containerized trees improves their survivability and results in more canopy cover faster. There will be a planting demonstration at the Arbor Day celebration this fall, which is when participants will be required to pick up their planting packets in order to receive their trees. Next slide. This year, we have selected a wider variety of species to be made available. This is to accommodate the multitude of planting sites throughout town. The variety of species allows for greater flexibility when considering overhead and below ground utility lines, while also providing some large form trees for those planting locations that do not have those same confinements. A total of 115 trees will be available this year, which is what we were able to secure with the available budget. And with that, I will take any questions that you might have. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Courtney. Are there any questions from council? Navarro, go ahead.
Well, thank you. As always, it's very exciting to have this program continue and have it see how it's grown from its tiny little trees in that nursery to being housed more fully at the city. So my question is, can you speak to whether there are any native trees, like native to our area, on the tree list?
There are not. So we are only allowed to use the trees that are on our approved street tree list. The Gary Oak is the only native tree that's on that list, and we did offer that last year. Gary Oak is not a commonly found tree in nurseries, especially in the size that we require for this particular program. So based on what we have available to us on that approved street tree list, that's really the only native tree.
This might not be a question for you, but it might, but I'm happy if whoever wants to answer it can. Following up on that, how are we going to go about creating an updated list that reflects the native species in our community, many of which are certainly under the required height?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Carr. Yes, that is a shortcoming of our existing street tree list that we have noted. We are very happy to have Courtney in her role, thanks to council leadership in this position. And that was one of the issues she has flagged for her work program for next year. So with the time constraints we had, the existing list that is before us in code, this is the program we're doing this fall. But yes, it is part of the CED work plan to examine all of the street tree section of code, including the list, and work on modifications after the adoption of the comp plan this fall.
Thank you.
For
I
flagging
appreciate
that.
it.
Lindsay, go ahead.
Yeah, a few questions. That's okay. I usually defer to Courtney on plant expertise, but isn't Douglas maple also on our street tree list, and that's also a native?
That would be correct.
Okay, gotcha. Just two. But I think those are the only two. And Gary Oak is super slow to grow. The other thing I want to point out, there's a lot of folks who are, looking at government efficiency and what we're doing right and what we're doing wrong. Often the costs and the benefits accrue in different places. And street trees is a fantastic example of where there are tremendous benefits for very little cost. But those benefits are very hard to measure and often accrue in different spaces. Things like shading asphalt so that it doesn't get hit by the sun as much and wear down as fast. Like, there are so many community benefits to street trees, like bang for our buck. This is one of the best things that we're doing. So I really thank you and everyone else for building this program up and making it happen. Thanks.
Thank you, Lindsay. Anyone else? Okay, I will just quickly follow up on Lindsay's comment that I think the other thing about this project is it's one that we're saying this is important now, because if we don't plant them now, we won't have them and they won't be big and beautiful in 20 years. And I appreciate that the way this has rolled out and with slightly different varieties. I went to school in a small town in Michigan, and in the summer it was beautiful. The trees, they had Dutch elm everywhere, and the trees were huge, and it was shady and otherwise really miserably hot. But all of them got sick at the same time. And so they were looking at a die-off of everything at the same time. And so I think this is exciting for coming back and, having us go for a walk in 20 years and seeing some of these trees, and also appreciate that there's some variety so we don't end up with that issue. But otherwise, thank you, and we'll look forward to the distribution in October.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. That brings us to the continuation of the budget goals discussion we had at our last meeting, which I asked to bring forward to tonight's meeting because Navarra wasn't there. And I just wanted to make sure she had a chance to weigh in. And it sounded like we had some things that were worth following up on. And I think, Serena, your presentation, having glanced through it, would reinforce that and the memo. So I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you. So we do have hopefully a brief presentation just to kind of go over some of the items that were discussed at the July 1st meeting.
Can I jump in again really quickly? Sorry.
Absolutely.
It seems like, and maybe you were going to say this, so my apologies if you were. We do need consensus on these items. And so some I think are already in process, but I think if there's anything that isn't that we feel strongly about as we go through the presentation, if we can just say, yes, let's move forward on that, or no, that might be helpful and efficient. Lindsay, go ahead.
Yeah, I would like some clarification on process before we get started, because last time we said something, our city manager or our mayor said, if we have consensus, we'll move forward. We went around, we all said stuff. And then I recall our city manager saying, it sounds like there's a consensus. And it's like, no, wait, we didn't object to what each other said. So I'm concerned that the lack of making a motion on some of this stuff is leading to really vague outcomes. And I'm looking at this list, and the first thing I see is that we want to raise revenue through traffic cameras and parking enforcement. And for the life of me, I cannot recall who on council recommended that. And I must have been asleep because I would have objected to that. So I'm not sure that this list that's being framed as a council consensus list of priorities is actually coming from city council and is instead coming from city staff. So we need to get clear on our presentation, our process for this, because I think we're being thrown under the bus with ideas that aren't ours. Thanks.
So I can speak to that. Latricia raised the issue of traffic cameras, so it made the list. So this is a comprehensive list of everything people said. And the point of tonight is to go through and say, is there a consensus on these items that people included? And I wanted to not do that without, I realize we're missing other people tonight. I didn't realize that was going to be the case, but I wanted to make sure we didn't move forward on this process without Navarra being able to weigh in because she was not able to be at our last meeting. So that's why we're here again. And my distinct idea is, if there is not consensus, these were like, throw out your ideas, and if there isn't consensus, then we don't move forward on them. Which is why I thought going through the presentation as they're talked about, we can identify whether there's a consensus to move forward at this time. Does that make sense?
So should we move to strike items, or should we just say, I don't object to traffic cameras, parking enforcement? That would break consensus and no need for motion.
Yeah, I think I can just ask as we go through if there's consensus, and if people object and there isn't a consensus, then we'll move on. Navarra, did you want to say something?
I was just going to say that I'm not sure if Lindsay has this in front of him, those slide presentations, but Lindsay, we're all looking at the printout of the PowerPoint, as well as what's in the packet.
Yeah, sorry, that might not be clear to you. We have this presentation that you're going to see here. We have it in front of us, so we're looking at it, and it has items one by one that we can go through and say, yes, we have consensus on that, or no, we don't. Let's try it, and if it doesn't work or you don't like what we're doing, we can revisit. Does that sound all right?
Yeah, so procedurally, could we stop after each item for discussion?
Yes.
Just to make sure we don't skip anything?
Yes, that's my idea.
Madam Mayor, apologies. We are working on sending that presentation over to Councilmember Shorman-Warren so that he can follow along as well.
Okay.
You'll just give us just a moment, and then we can bring that presentation back up.
Okay. They're going to email it to you too, Lindsay. So you have it also in your email.
And so, point of clarification, that is the same presentation that everybody in the council chamber is watching.
Yes.
Thanks.
And Mayor and Council, as the clerk is forwarding that PowerPoint, there are hard copies available here in chambers if members of the audience would like them. For those who may not be able to see from the screen, there is a stack of the PowerPoint available. And as was mentioned by the mayor, the broad selection and section of items that were flagged by council members, including traffic cameras, which was raised by a council member, are on this list. And then staff has attempted to sort those items, all of them, into several different buckets, short-term, long-term, and where staff is recommending no further action at this time. And I think the finance director will go through those, but just buying a little time, but that was enough, and the PowerPoint's up, so I will defer to the finance director.
Thank you. Okay, so as mentioned, we do have a number of items that were brought up during the July 1st meeting. And so what we'd like to do is just take a moment to do a very high level overview of what those council priorities were, and then kind of discuss that council direction for moving that forward, as well as budget next steps. And then we'll open it up for some council discussion furthering the budget goals.
Serena, I'm sorry to interrupt you again. So I'm just going to clarify the process. Let's just listen to the presentation, and then we'll use the presentation to go back through, because I think it's good to hear all of the things and then go back when we have the big picture and review them one by one. So sorry, Serena, please now do go ahead.
No problem. Thank you. Okay, so as Deputy City Manager Goings mentioned, what we have done is we've taken the items that were discussed during the July 1st meeting, and we've separated these options into revenues and expenditures, and then into 3 categories in the revenue area, because there were a number of revenue options that were presented. So we have a short-term category that includes items that can be implemented in 2 years or less. Our long-term category includes items that will require more than 2 years for implementation. And then we have a category for no further action recommended. And so these are really items that the city can't implement on our own. And so we have a recommendation on that as we move toward that category. And so we'll start with our revenue category. And our first item, and these are not necessarily in any order, this is a compilation of what was discussed during the council meeting, are the traffic cameras. And so we currently have a funded project in 2025, TR 0919, for our traffic camera safety program that's been adopted in our 2026 to 2031 capital facilities plan. This project is designed to start with one area and then utilize the revenues from that area to expand the program. And so staff is recommending at this time that project continue as planned. We just reviewed that during our capital facilities plan process. And so we are recommending that we continue that for 2025. The next item on the list are—
Point of clarification, we're going to go through all this and then go through it all again.
I just thought that way Serena can just get through her presentation and then we can go back and talk about it. That way we have—
We're going to go back on every item and talk about each item.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, our next item are for ball field partnerships. And so the city does have a number of agreements in place for the use of the ball fields. Many of them are with organizations that benefit schools or youth. And so the community benefit outweighs what we receive in our revenue for that. However, there are some agreements that we can take a look at and further evaluate upon the renewal for additional revenue to offset those services. And so those would be available once those agreements do come up for renewal. And so we are recommending in this area that staff just continue as planned by reviewing those as they come up. So our next item in our short-term priorities are cruise ship fees. So staff is currently reviewing the agreement that we have in place for those fees for cruise ships. And that agreement is coming up for renewal, and we do anticipate that we'll see an increase for the collection coming, and that will be coming forward to council for approval at an upcoming meeting, hopefully shortly. And so staff is recommending that we continue as planned, as council will have an opportunity to review that agreement once it's presented. . 'Cause 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 ' Moving into our long-term priorities, and again, these are items that will take longer than 2 years for staff to implement. We had our tax increment financing, or TIF, conversation. And so just as a highlight and overview of what this is, this occurs when select properties in the city are identified as an increment area, and they are allowed to be taxed at a higher rate in order to pay for public improvements. And it's important to note that those public improvements must promote private development that would not otherwise occur, or that will increase the assessed valuations within that increment area as a result of implementing that TIF. There's quite a process that's associated with this. There would need to be a study and a project analysis that would need to be submitted to the state treasurer's office. And then within 90 days of submitting that, we would be required to hold a minimum of 2 public briefings on the TIF area, and then pass an ordinance to move that forward. And because of this, it is quite a heavy lift. Additional staff capacity would be required to move this forward based on our current work plan. And so staff is recommending that we explore the TIF options at a later date for future budgets. So the next item in our long-term priorities is our regional fire authority. So these encompass 2 or more fire jurisdictions. They must be created by the vote of the people, and there would be a committee that would get together for that creation of that authority. And what it does is it enables these multiple fire agencies to share equipment and resources, and grants them independent taxing authority on the property tax levy. And so staff are currently, have currently started moving forward with some discussions with other districts for consideration of what that could look like. And so staff is recommending continuing as planned, with staff continuing those discussions until further information is available for council consideration. Next, we discuss the economies of scale. And so during the budget process each year, we do go through and look for efficiencies within the budget. However, staff will prioritize analyzing the programs within the budget to determine if there are options to partner with other agencies in order to create further efficiencies within the budget, or to look for those areas that do have those economies of scale potentially. And so that is definitely a process that will take more than a few months. And so we are looking at maybe some efficiencies that might be available for 2026, but this is more of a long-term planning opportunity for the city. And so staff is recommending that we continue as planned for anything that is able to be in 2026, but likely the majority of those efficiencies would be considered for future budget years. Last, looking at our lease revenue on the slide, staff is currently, as council is aware, looking at a 4-phase approach to determine areas where lease revenue is not offsetting services. And part of that 4-phase approach is to look at areas where some of those revenues should be increased because of those services. And so staff is recommending that we just continue with that as planned, that we just move that forward within those phases, and we address each of those as they occur. Park revenue was also discussed. And so there are a number of areas that staff can explore to look at some regional partnership opportunities that can provide funding for our parks department. This is something that would require quite a bit of research and discussion with other jurisdictions. And so something that is going to take longer than the few months that we have for moving forward with our 2026 budget. And so staff is recommending that we explore those options at a later date and provide some information back to council once it's available. And then finally, in our long-term priorities area, we had our vacant property registry. So this would include owners registering their vacant properties and paying a fee for safety and compliance services. Putting this together and analyzing those properties and determining the needs there would also be a heavy lift, and additional staff capacity would also be required based on our work plan, or something would have to be reprioritized in order to move this forward. And so staff is recommending at this time that we explore the options for that registry at a later date for a future budget year. And then in our revenue area, we have a category for no further action recommended. And so within this, there are 4 items. They include payments in lieu of taxes or a national park fee, to advocate to the state for a higher sales tax percentage coming back to the city, tourism impact fees, and additional lodging tax percentage. All of these items are not something that the city is allowed to move forward with. Per RCW, there are set standards for many of these fees or taxes. And so these are not something that we can move forward with on our own, and it would require some legislation for that to change in order for us to be able to do so. And so staff is recommending that these items be considered during the next legislative priorities briefing for discussion and inclusion. Okay, so our next category includes our expenditures. And within this, council did highlight some capacity needs for our police department. And so currently, staff is pursuing grant funding that's made available through House Bill 2015. And this is grant funding that allows for personnel needs. And so the city anticipates that we would be eligible for up to 4 police officers and a record specialist for offset there. That grant funding is not, an application is not yet available. It becomes available toward the end of the month on the 27th. And so we will be pursuing that when it is available. We do believe we're eligible and that we have a good chance of obtaining those funds. And so we are recommending at this time that we continue to pursue that funding, as well as any additional grant funding that is available for the capacity needs in our police department. We also discussed capacity needs for the fire department. And so just some options that are available for revenue to expand the fire department include an EMS or fireman's pension levy. Both would require voter approval to move forward. City staff have also moved forward with a grant application called the SAFER Grant. We've requested funds for additional staffing for 7 positions that we applied for this year, and we're waiting to hear back on that grant. And so staff is recommending that we continue conversations with fire agencies about a regional district and to continue to pursue grant opportunities as they become available. The next item that was discussed by City Council on July 1st were the Phase 2 business licensing and how we move that forward in our 2026 budget. This phase has already been approved by Council, and we have started to collect business licensing revenue for approximately about a month now. And so what this Phase 2 would look like based on the collection, if it were to come in as planned, would be to, in this order, a new part-time public records assistants to support enhanced transparency, a new part-time business districts and neighborhoods advocate to foster greater civic engagement and economic development, and a new part-time citywide homelessness navigator to better connect support and services. And so the staff recommendation for inclusion in Phase 2 into the budget is based on the revenue expectations. And so we'll be monitoring that as we continue to receive them. And so in October, when the proposed budget is presented for council consideration, if we feel that any of these items can be implemented within the budget based on the collection, we will be recommending those at that time, and staff does recommend moving forward with that recommendation. And then the last item that we had within our expenditures category was for a general government project manager. And unfortunately, funding in this area there's not as many available funding options for this position. And so we're really looking at general fund tax collection dollars or grants that would be available in order to move this position forward. And so staff is recommending that we would only include this position in the budget for 2026 if we are able to identify grant funding that would be available in that year for this position. And so we are looking for a little bit of council direction. And so we are requesting council consensus to implement the city council budget goals with the staff recommendations that I just went over, including some of those timelines that I mentioned that are provided into the 2026 budget process as we move forward. However, if the majority of council would like to make changes to those staff recommendations, staff is also requesting consensus on any of the items council would like to be included in the budget for review. And if the changes involve an increase in expenditures, direction for programs that would need to be reduced or accommodate other goals would also be requested. And also we are looking for how that change ties into our strategic plan. And then finally, just as a reminder where we are with our budget process, July and August, we do work on our departmental budget entry. That departmental entry is open. The departments are actively working on their budgets. August through September, we go through city manager meetings with each department. We go through every budget line item and balance the budget. And then we currently are expecting that the 2026 preliminary budget document would be distributed for review on October 3rd with a planned budget work session currently of October 28th. And so with that, council, I will open it back up for council discussion. Any questions you may have?
All right. Lindsay, could you hold your question for 5 minutes so we can take a 5-minute break and then come back and pick up this discussion? That would be my preference. Then I can concentrate a little better. So we will take a 5-minute break and we'll come back with council discussion on budget goals. All right, we will go ahead and get started again. So we are on the council discussion portion of the budget discussion. And Lindsay, you had your hand up, so go ahead.
Yeah, can we go to the slide 18, please? I think it talks about process.
Can you articulate just a little more clearly? Sorry, I didn't understand what you said.
Slide 18, please.
Doesn't move quickly, does it? Easier to click on it when it was open, but.
It's hot out, so the system's moving slow. $14, $15, almost there.
So the previous slide mentioned the word consensus. This one says that the majority of council would like changes to the staff recommendations. Staff requests consensus on any items council would like included in the budget for review. I am confused by how we're using the word consensus. It is not seeming like we're using it the same as the term unanimous consent. Unanimous consent is a very clear procedure where nobody objects to something and it passes by unanimous consent. Everybody votes yes for it. This slide uses the term majority of council and then says consensus. I think consensus is similar to unanimous consent in that it is where all of us agree on something, but that is not how we approve the budget. Some of us can vote no and we can still approve the budget. So I don't understand why we're using, what process we're using here to work on developing the budget. It's generally majority of the council. I forget now if the budget has to be a supermajority, but that is not the same in my mind as consensus. So I'm asking for clarification on what this slide means because it doesn't make sense to me.
I will go to staff, but quickly just want to say, in my mind, I was thinking about it in the way that we do late items, where some people might not be interested, but for people, the majority are interested in adding it. And maybe that doesn't feel okay to everyone in this case. So I'm happy to do something different, but that in my mind was, when I read this, that's what I was thinking is, are there three of us who say, yes, I'm interested in keeping that on the list for consideration? Like if it was a late item. But let me go to Navarra and then Drew.
I think that process is fine. Just the word consensus means all. And I think that the issue that Lindsay is having is a very valid one, that word has a meaning that is being misused in this context that our council tends to misuse.
Fair enough.
And so if we mean majority, I think that's likely fine. I'm looking at Lindsay, but I think that's fine for me if we're talking about majority, but I think we just need to be clear that we're talking about a majority of council, not all.
All right. Lindsay, do you agree with Navarra's assessment?
Yeah, the way that consensus has gotten used, at our previous discussion, and then the mixing majority and consensus here, I think is basically us not providing clear direction to our staff and then basically getting the staff version of what they want to suggest. So the way that we direct our staff to act is by passing motions. When we don't pass a motion, we haven't actually done anything. We just talked. And I don't want to talk. I want to take action. So we should pass motions and make this stuff happen instead of pretend like we're providing direction by all talking about saying something, but not actually passing a motion.
Okay. Noted. Drew?
I just wanted to clarify my stance on consensus right this second. And if we would like to change and go with the suggestion that Lindsay made, I'm perfectly okay with that. But in this context, unanimous consent has a very specific meaning, and I recognize we have two lawyers. The other use of consensus does not mean unanimous, however. And in that context was how I was reading it in this one. I was reading in this slide, staff request consensus, I was reading it at the more colloquial way of a general majority that's vaguely defined as pretty much everybody. And that's how I was reading it. However, if we want to make actual motions, I fully support that as well.
All right. I was just going to ask if there's consensus on passing motions, but I won't do that. Well, let's try it with motion and see where we go. Sorry, I guess I said I was going to let staff weigh in also, and I did not, but maybe that's okay because it's council process. So let's go to the beginning. And we are at traffic cameras. And Navarra, you have your hand up, so I will let you go ahead.
Yeah, so I prepared a number of pages of notes on this one, but I'm happy to just make the motion to remove traffic cameras from our from the budget priorities if we're making motions. So I move to move traffic cameras project TR0919 from our budget priorities for 2026.
Actually, I want to withdraw my second. I think this actually, procedurally, we should direct action and not basically have to pass something that is, I mean, Pat, the yes vote should be include revenue from traffic cameras and parking enforcement as described. The no vote should be this doesn't move forward, and not the other way around, which is how we've gotten ourselves procedurally messed up at this point.
Okay, well, I think Lindsay and I are fairly aligned on our philosophical challenges with this one, so maybe I will just briefly say that I am opposed to having this in the plan if that wasn't clear. I'm happy to speak more to that if we need to. I'm also happy to just say that I won't be supporting a budget that includes this item in it.
Lindsay, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to be very clear that it is important to have traffic safety. It is important to have efficient parking. We, in the past, have discussed these things not as revenue sources, but as public safety and good transportation planning opportunities. If you go to Project TR0919, which was added in 2019 when we talked about this stuff extensively, that project says justification, improve traffic and school zone safety and compliance with traffic laws. It does not include a justification of increasing revenue. So it's disingenuous to put this in as if it's a revenue project that we've been planning since 2019. It is not. And we expressly said back in those conversations, we would support this if it leads to improved public safety and traffic, but not as a revenue program. And so, get this out of there. It should not be included here. I think that's the end of the story. Since 2019, personally, I feel like I've learned a lot about traffic safety, and I wonder how much traffic cameras versus traffic calming of the streets around schools would be a better option. So, I'm fine moving forward with the traffic cameras as it is in the capital facilities plan as the beginning of assessing this, but it is not described in the capital facilities plan as a revenue project. And we as the council would not have approved it back in 2019 if that was the express goal. Thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay. Drew, go ahead.
I do agree with the assessment Lindsay's points with, I don't see this as a revenue generator. So then I guess my question is more directed towards staff. The presentation has this listed under basically revenue generation. Is that how we actually have it classified in our documentations, or was that just ease of putting together? I realize how hard it is to try to condense a lot of information into like a dozen slides, or was that just for the sake of ease for presentation?
Yeah, I can speak to that. So it was brought up in the revenue category from one of the council members, and so that's why staff classified it that way. Our recommendation from staff is to continue it as it exists in the CFP.
Okay, so then I guess just a follow-up clarification towards staff and us council. What we're currently discussing is whether or not we agree that this is a revenue source, which it sounds like at least 3 of us do not, and more that the way it had been originally passed, which is staff's recommendation, is how we continue with it.
I would agree with your assessment. Yes, I don't, since I haven't spoken yet, I will say, I don't have any particular, it was raised in, I remember Latricia talking about it, and you know, if they issue tickets, there is money, but it is very clear, both in the staff memo tonight and in the CFP, that it is meant as a, for lack of a better term, a force multiplier, where we can't have patrol all the time in school zones. And I do think it would be inappropriate, based on the way it's in the CFP, to move it forward as a revenue generator. So if someone, I feel like, I'm just going to say from a procedural perspective, I think the staff recommendation is a staff recommend continuing this project as planned, which is not as a revenue source. So a motion could be to move forward with this, with the project as planned and not as a revenue source. Then it's both positive and negative, but is very clear.
And Mayor and council members, if that is correct, and just to step back, every item on this list came from at least one council member, and whether that was a majority or by consensus, because of the attendance, we decided to go broad and include as many items that came to us from council, either by standalone emails, phone calls, conversations at the meeting, or by standalone emails. And so if we were overbroad, I'll accept that responsibility. And so, yes, as pointed out, staff's recommendation is to proceed with the capital facilities plan project as approved by council and not as a revenue generator. And if council sees fit to make a motion to that effect, that it proceed as the CFP project and not as a revenue generator, that will be crystal clear and will be as a motion in the record for all staff to understand going forward.
All right. Well, if someone wants to make a motion, they can do that, and then we can move on.
Since this process has gotten so muddled, I move that traffic cameras are not used as revenue generators and are used only as planned in TRO 919 for traffic safety.
Second.
Go ahead, Navarra.
I am still not going to support this, though I appreciate that it will pass and that it's certainly a better opportunity than what was presented in the presentation. But I think, as Lindsay articulated, the issue is that we have unsafe streets, and then it's because of poor street design that, as we all know, happened many years before, we were on council, and many years before many of our staff members were ever on staff. And this poor street design has led to speeding, has led to, increased, safety concerns for, bicyclists, folks in wheelchairs, people with strollers, pedestrians. I'm sure the list goes on. But I did quite a bit of research about best practices on how you actually reduce speeding. And it's not by traffic cameras. Traffic cameras unfairly, target people in communities of color. They disproportionately affect certain sectors of the community. And what it does when we have costs and fees associated with speeding is it criminalizes poverty. So people who get a speeding ticket, that's a crime, right? And so it goes to a criminal, it goes to the prosecutor, and they charge that crime in district court. And what happens is that many of those people can't afford to pay those fees, and so then their license gets suspended. And then those people get pulled over for having a suspended license. And tell me how I know this, it's because I'm representing them in court in Jefferson County. So I think when we're considering what our measures are for increasing traffic safety, we have to consider the downstream effects, particularly when 61% of our community here in Port Angeles is on free and reduced lunch, right? So whether or not this is being used as a revenue generator or not, the reality is that by having these traffic cameras that have a cost associated with them, which is a ticket for speeding, that means that we are further criminalizing our community, and that will be a very distinct action that this council will be choosing to take, rather than to choose to invest in programs and upstream approaches to actually make our streets safer. So some of those programs that have been successful is lowering the traffic speeds throughout all of the city, right? To make sure that people are going less fast in every neighborhood, in all throughout a community, as well as having increased signage throughout those communities as well, putting in things like roundabouts, which we all know are already part of our plan. Seattle actually did this, and they did those two things, lowering speed limits and having increased signage, and it led to a 22% reduction in vehicle crashes. Which brings me to, I think, what we have to talk about here, which is that for every other street project that we have in the city, and we all just received a lengthy complaint, right, with a number of signatures from folks who live between the bridges about the fast speeds on Pine Street, that there are people who come to us and talk to us at City Council every time about how in their community and their street, the traffic speeds are too high. And what we keep being told is that if we want to see change, a traffic study has to be done. So my question is, where are those traffic studies? In those school zones, how many crashes have we had? Is the speeding that is occurring actually leading to violence against people? Is it leading to people being hurt? Is it leading to people actually being unsafe? And I'm not sure that we have that data to successfully say whether or not we know that. So I'm not going to support this, not because I think that we shouldn't have safe streets, we should, but I don't think that criminalizing people for our poor street design is the way to do it. And while I'm glad that this will pass through council in a way that doesn't make this, it makes it clear that this is not a way to raise money off the backs of the poor, I think it's important to recognize that this is one of the few street projects that we are choosing to allow to go forward without having seen any data that I can remember on whether or not it's actually important for us to do and whether or not that money could be spent in a better way in a different community to make their streets safer.
All right. Thank you, Navarra. Really quickly before we continue, I appreciate your words. And I think we need to be careful that we stick to all of these things in the budget context and not in a reworking the CFP context, because it's already, so I understand your words were about not supporting it as a revenue source, but I think I want to be careful that the way the motion is worded, if it fails, I think this is the problem with the motion and only 4 people and the way it's written. I think we all agree that we don't want it to be a revenue source. Can someone repeat the motion? Carrie, could you repeat the motion?
Mayor, I have my hand up.
Okay. I know. I just wanted to get some quick clarification.
Mayor, what I have, the motion was to, the traffic cameras are not used as revenue generators, but as planned in the CFP for traffic safety. If that's incorrect, please correct me.
That sounds right. Okay, Lindsay, go ahead.
So in the CFP, we spent $35 on this in prior years from the general fund. In 2025, we have budgeted $35,000 in capital costs. What have we spent money on up to this point? What are we projected to do with the $35,000 this year? And have we hired a traffic camera firm to provide cameras and enforcement functions as is described in the project description?
So I don't believe I have enough information to be able to answer that correctly tonight. I can certainly bring that back to council. We do have several work efforts, projects going towards traffic cameras and lightings. We've had the traffic controls that have nothing necessarily to do with speeding, but the movement of traffic throughout our city. Here most recently around town, we're upgrading traffic lights to the LED signals, and these are all parts of building upon each other. Cameras, the ability to use cameras for speeding enforcement was another level, an option that was afforded to us. But I'd have to go back to staff, city engineering, traffic engineer, and kind of confirm that breakout. I don't have that available this evening. Thank you.
We had extensive discussion on this around 2018, 2019, when I was first on council and Mayor Dexter was first on council. It seemed at that time like the police department was excited to move forward with it under the force multiplier idea that we don't have police on the street, but like this is a way to do traffic enforcement. I think our understanding of our collective understanding as a city of good street design and good traffic safety has evolved quite a bit since then, and it's evolved in the right direction. And my concern is that once we hire a firm to manage one camera, the cost benefit of them managing 20 cameras, 30 cameras, 40 cameras is marginally smaller with every additional camera. It's that first camera that really commits us down this path and that relationship with the traffic camera firm. So if we haven't yet entered into that conversation, then I think we should really rethink this project and consider it a good thing we pulled the plug on it sooner than later. So I move to table the main motion until we have a meeting with Chief Smith available, Jonathan Bohm available to answer questions about the current status of the project, and in particular, whether we have a contract in place with the traffic camera firm and the nature of that contract. Thank you.
Second.
I'm just going to acknowledge I will likely not be able to repeat that motion verbatim. I will do my best. Okay. I am going to, sorry, does anyone else want to speak to the motion? Drew, do you want to speak to it? Okay, I'm going to vote no on the motion because I think we just passed. I appreciate the concern and I'm happy to talk about it. But we just passed the CFP with this in it, and that would have been a great time for us to call that out. Doesn't mean we can't change our minds as we go, but.
Point of order.
Yeah.
I don't believe tabling is debatable.
Oh, okay, never mind then. Thank you for the handy cheat sheet. All right, so we have a motion to table this item until we can have a meeting where Chief Smith, Jonathan Bohm, and other relevant staff are available, and we have the answers about where we are in the process. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Opposed?
No.
No. Well, okay, so the motion fails because of a tie. This is the fun thing about only having 4 people. Okay, so we still have the main motion, which is that traffic cameras not be used as a revenue, but continue the project as it is in the CFP. So let's vote on that. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed?
No.
Nay.
Okay, so I'm going to suggest that we're going to have a hard time getting through this process with only 4 people because we don't have a tiebreaker for motions. And so I'm asking if there are suggestions for Navarra. Go ahead.
I think this is one of the few very contentious items. And as I said before, like I have a problem with this project, and eventually we will have to approve whatever is in the CFP. Just because it was put in the CFP doesn't mean it gets approved by council. And so I'm telling everybody here and staff that I will not be supporting that project when it comes to us. And I will speak again to the challenges that presents. So I understand, like, as I said, I certainly understand that the better option is that this isn't used as a revenue generator. And if that's true, it shouldn't have been put in the revenue generating bucket at all. But that being said, right, like I don't support the project. I don't support this at all. Things change in a couple of months. I have learned and grown in that time, and I certainly hope that council recognizes that they can also learn and grow in 2 months since we passed something, or acknowledge that those projects were valid at the time and maybe no longer fit the needs of our community. So when this comes back to us, as I'm sure it will, because it is in the capital facilities plan, I will continue to vote no and to continue to speak out against it, as I hope other members of council will.
Thank you, Navarra. Okay, so while you were talking, I was listening to you. I had a thought before you spoke and I've lost it, but go ahead, Drew.
So just as a potential suggestion, one, in case we keep coming up with 2 twos, but also because I hate working on budget when we're down 2 council members, is there both a logistical reason why we can, and is there any discussion of whether or not we move this as part of the special meeting on the 22nd, either beforehand or after? Because I know we only have 1 meeting in August, and I don't really want to wait an entire month to come back to this.
Right. Well, it's not completely up to me, but I am not in favor of moving it to the 22nd. It's already a 3-hour work session, and I don't think we want to dilute the content of that. I think I agree with Navarra. This is probably the only one that's particularly challenging. I mean, I might be wrong, but I think so. And I just want to be clear, it's on the list as a revenue source because this list captures basically the broad swath of things that were raised in the council discussion at the last meeting. We didn't delete anything from the list because we didn't get into the weeds on it. Because I thought we were down a council member, it made sense to wait. And now, of course, sorry, Navarra, it might have been easier to handle it last meeting. But that's why it's here, not because staff is suggesting it as a revenue source, but because a council member brought it up, and so it made the list. I appreciate that staff didn't edit that for us because that we made the list. So we're just dealing with it now. If we were consensus, I would tell you that Latricia still supports it. That's not, or I realize maybe that's not the right way to use the word, but that doesn't matter right now because of the way we're doing it. She's not here. So I will go to Lindsay and then we'll see if we can figure out a way to move on from this. Go ahead, Lindsay.
Yeah, I think we can move on, but I'm again confused. It says in our memo written by our staff for this item, revenue collection with multiple cameras can range from 100,000 to 150,000 depending on compliance. Revenue would offset costs in the police department. That is not coming from the Capital Facilities Plan Project TRO 919. That is new text related to this project written by our staff. So that is much more detailed information than what we have for the subsequent 2 items that we're looking at for most of these items. It seems like there was research done, and I'm not really sure with what plan means, as in, is planned including that revenue that's described here? Because it sounds like that's what's planned for the TR 0919 traffic camera project. That is not what we approved in the capital facilities plan. So I'm glad we've clarified that, but somebody wrote that and gave it to us, and it was our staff.
Right. And I think that was because it was asked for, could you go back? That's the other reason we brought it back was, could we get some more information about it? And so it could be used that way if we wanted to be, dang it, my computer just turned itself off again. So I think my recommendation is we vote on we already did. God, and it failed. Okay, so I think let's move on. And I will say, short of a motion, I understand Navarro's point. I agree. We will have to talk about it again at some point when we get to the project itself. There is opportunity for council consideration there. I'm not interested in this being a revenue source. I'm happy saying that tonight. And I think Drew also said that. So I feel like we didn't get a motion, but I think it's pretty clear that the 4 people here tonight are not interested in this being a revenue source. So that part, I think we got what we needed from that. So is anyone interested in handling ball field partnerships and cruise ship fees together? Yeah. Navarro, go ahead.
I'm happy to do that. Again, my apologies for missing the last meeting.
I don't need to keep making it sound like it was a...
No. I have a question about the ball field partnerships that I'm sure was covered in the last meeting, and
we just threw things out of the last meeting, and that's part of the reason why we're coming back tonight was are there ways that we could maximize that or do those were sort of the questions. And so this is staff saying, in the context of the revenue discussion, here's what that could look like.
I can answer that a little bit too. So this one's a really good example of the 5-year contract with the Port Angeles Lefties that's coming up and having discussions on what that's going to look like moving forward.
Great. Yeah, I have no problem. I was going to just potentially expand it a little bit that we also have tennis ball courts and pickleball courts, and I'm not sure if we collect user fees on any of the agencies that we partner with who use those. But I was going to suggest if we do, in fact, collect user fees, and I'm not suggesting that we levy additional fees. I just want to be clear. If people aren't paying, then they should not have to pay. But if there are organizations that pay for the use of other like sports complex, for lack of a better term, then I would like to see that sort of all wrapped up together and be a little bit more broad than ball field. But if that's not the case, I'm happy to keep it as ball field partnerships. And I'm also happy to make our cruise ships pay more.
All right. Any other thoughts from council or motion? Oh, Corey, did you want to say something else?
We're also currently working on a contract with the cruise ships, so that'll be coming to council here shortly.
Thank you. All right.
I'll make the motion. I move to include ball field partnerships and cruise ship fees as presented as a part of the 2026 budget revenue sources.
Second.
All right. Any discussion on this one? Okay. So we have a motion to include ball ship partnerships and cruise ship fees in the 2026, but did you say revenue? Sorry. Yeah. Revenue discussion, revenue sources. Sorry. Thank you. Anyone opposed to the motion, please state your opposition. All right, hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. And that brings us to long-term priorities. If I may speak to TIF, that was me. And the only reason I mentioned it is because we were throwing out ideas, and it is based on my interpretation that folks who have been participating in the comp plan process, there is language about potential tax increment financing in the economic development section of the comp plan draft. And so I thought it was worth mentioning it in the discussion of revenues, because I am under the impression that people representing potentially some part of town, like maybe the waterfront district, just throwing that out there as a potential example, not saying it came from them, mentioned it. I'm perfectly comfortable with staff recommendation that we explore those options at a later time. It was simply, hey, we're talking about potential revenue ideas. I saw it there, so I thought I'd mention it. I'm not wedded in any way to this moving forward right now. Go ahead, Navarro.
I'm a little fuzzy on the TIF funding. So could somebody give me an example of like in another community or something locally, it doesn't really matter, but like what are those projects that would qualify? Like a stadia? Like what are we talking about here?
So it would be anything that would increase the assessed valuation within that like little area that you're designating essentially. So a committee would meet and do a project analysis of what that would include and what the estimated increases to the assessed valuation would be. So it's pretty broad, but it does have to be tied to that increase.
And I believe, Deputy Mayor, the city of Sequim is exploring a tax increment finance area to assist with some utility issues, and that's been covered in the Sequim Gazette. So it is something one of our neighboring jurisdictions is exploring, but it is a heavy lift, and that's why, again, it was an item flagged by council, so it made it on the list, but our recommendation is with staff bandwidth right now, this be something that we discuss and explore it later.
Lindsay, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with discussing it later. And I also will say, I think the utility of TIF is going to depend on the project. It's kind of like taking out debt, doing a municipal bond. It's like, is it always the right thing to do? No. Is it a tool that we could use for the right project? Maybe. Thanks.
Thank you, Lindsay. Does anyone want to make a motion to, well, I guess I could say it out loud, but go ahead.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to explore TIF funding options at a later date.
Second.
Any further discussion? All right, so we have a motion to explore TIF options at a later date. Anyone opposed to the motion, please state your opposition. Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. Thank you. All right. I think this, I don't remember if someone mentioned Regional Fire Authority, but I certainly mentioned the next item or an item on the next page as we move to, oh no, hold on.
Mayor, I believe it was Latricia that mentioned the Regional Fire Authority, if I remember correctly.
So I'm the one who said, I asked for one this later from a cost perspective, which is I would love to be able to increase our fire staffing, but I'll talk about that when we get to that one. Are there any questions about Regional Fire Authority? I'm inclined to let the staff working on this project continue working on, are there benefits as we continue to grow? And we already are seeing some great collaboration with duty chief rotation and automatic mutual aid and things like that. Sorry, I'm speaking out of turn, but anyway, I'm in favor of what staff is recommending here, which is to continue researching this or continue the work on what this might look like.
I move that staff continues discussing Regional Fire Authority with other districts for consideration.
Second.
All right, any further questions? Okay, so we have a motion to direct staff to continue discussions on Regional Fire Authority. Was that it? Sorry, I should have written it down.
Yeah, I literally copied the bottom of the slide, discussing this with other districts for consideration.
Thank you. Yep. Anyone opposed to the motion, please state your opposition. All right, hearing none, the motion passes. All right. Any chance some of these could be bundled? Navarro, go ahead.
Yeah, okay. I move that staff will analyze programs for economies of scale to determine, sorry, I'm going to start over. I move that staff will analyze programs of economies of scale and lease revenues and continue that as planned.
Second.
Okay, any comments or questions on that? Staff, anything you want to throw in? Okay, so we have a motion to direct staff to continue analyzing programs for economies of scale and to continue work on lease revenues as planned. Anyone opposed to the motion, please state your opposition. All right, hearing none, the motion passes. And then we have park revenue and vacant property registry. I might go to staff to speak to the park revenue. I don't remember who brought that up. I think it was Amy, but and I brought up the vacant property registry. It was something we have talked about in the past, and I think would be something if we implemented that, in my mind, would have a specific target for the revenue. But I also understand that if we're talking about capacity and things like that, that now might not be the time for that. But something I just wanted to throw out because I think it's something we have talked about in the past and could potentially help us move forward with some more affordable housing, but also in my mind, and maybe I don't need to be talking about this because it's not a revenue source for that reason, but I also think we had talked about a revenue registry as a sort of stick to any carrots to people leaving their properties vacant for years on end, like my neighbor's house that has been empty since 2019 and could be lived in and is not, and there's no particular incentive for them to fix it up and rent it or sell it. So anything on, go ahead, Navarro.
I was just going to say that to expand on the vacant property registry, and again, happy to have them as long-term priorities. But I think, you know, a few of us have had conversations with particularly downtown business owners, not to put you on the spot, Drew, and I'm not talking about you, but other folks who, you know, are concerned about the vacant buildings downtown. And that I think it is important to talk about the vacant storefronts when we're talking about vacant properties and thinking about the ways that having so many vacant storefronts, it devalues our downtown. It makes it less attractive for people to come and hang out and want to be there because those storefronts are not nice places to be, right? You can't go in. They're kind of a blight in our downtown corridor. And so I think there is like a financial cost to that when we're specifically talking about businesses to our community as a whole. And so while I'm happy that we look through those options for a future time, I think it's valuable, you know, to look at not just the housing, the challenges of housing, but also the challenges that that our downtown has had, where you just walk past empty storefront after empty storefront, and it's cheaper for many of those owners to just leave. There's no incentive for them to, you know, or stick, right? There's no carrot or stick to have them be successfully rented because they're owned outright. And so I hope that we can fold in those discussions when they come up in the future. I'm happy to make the motion to explore options for park revenue and vacant property registries at a later date.
Second.
Any further discussion? Thank you, Navarro. Okay, so we have a motion to explore options for park revenue and vacant property at a later date. Anyone opposed to the motion, please state your opposition. All right, motion passes unanimously. I don't think do we need any action on the no further action recommended? Yes. Okay, Navarro, go ahead.
Okay, so I would respectfully like to talk about number one, payment in lieu of taxes, not the national park fee. So I want a little bit of clarification about why no further action is recommended for the payments in lieu of taxes. Could we hear a little bit more about why there's no action recommended for that?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Carr, and the Finance Director will help me here a little bit. Maybe not the best header, but with these 4 items, we aren't currently able to do these things in their current state. And so that's why the recommendation is no further action for this budget, because we need to put this budget to bed in the next month or two. But staff does recommend for all items 1, 2, 3, and 4 that this be an item of consideration for council during your next legislative priorities briefing. It's my understanding that payments in lieu of taxes is set at the federal level, and so would be part of a conversation about future legislative changes or a conversation with our congressional delegation. So that the window is shutting for, or maybe closing for this budget cycle, but definitely something that staff suggests considering during your next legislative priorities.
Okay, I have some follow-up questions. The first follow-up question I have is how much do we receive in payments in lieu of taxes right now?
Currently, payments in lieu of taxes are passed from the federal government to counties, and counties do not have an obligation to send those to any other jurisdictions. The city currently does not collect anything in payments in lieu of taxes.
Well, okay, so I asked MRSC earlier today that same question, and they sent me a very handy email, which I would like to read in part, which says, the city should, however, be receiving a portion of PILT whenever the county receives such revenues from the state, and those funds are related to federal property within the city limits. The city is a taxing district and, according to the statute, should be receiving an amount, quote, in the same proportion that the state and such taxing units would have shared in such property taxes if the same had been levied, end quote, as stated in RCW 84.72.020. So I understand that we need to lobby somebody about getting the money that we are owed. But in this case, that entity is the county because they are under a statutory obligation to pay us that money. I'm happy to forward this email as well, but I would like us to consider, like, I understand that us lobbying the county is also likely not going to make it into the 2026 budget. But I do want us to continue to, as a council, consider strong action to encourage our county partners to pay us what we're owed, because there is a statutory obligation for them to do so. I also looked up the issues with the federal government, and currently there's only the state actually gets to set their the guidelines of who gets paid, and so every state except for Wisconsin has the distribution go to counties. But our dear friends in Wisconsin apparently have it go to other taxing districts as well. So there is that opportunity to lobby the state to just have our federal partners pay us directly, which I would be happy to add to our legislative priorities discussion. And Lindsay, I'm looking at you for AWC priorities, but I do think it's incumbent on us to collect what we're owed from the county.
Thank you, Navarra. I will just jump in and say I don't disagree, especially since it might not be the majority, but if I had to hazard a guess, most of the federal properties are inside the city limits. So that would be good. Lindsay, go ahead.
Yeah, if MRC is correct, which is often but not always the case, I hope that we also pursue back payments owed to city by the county. And also, I will no longer be on Legislative Priorities Committee after this year. And at this point, the ship's kind of sailed for priorities. The process is already moving forward. So adding new things is probably too late. So I'll look to other council members to advocate on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. I don't feel like I agree with Navarra, and I don't know that I feel like we need to take any action on that tonight. I think we can agree that the time is too short for the 26 budget. So let's move. let's see if we can get through it's just 2 pages. If we can get through the 2 pages of revenue and then take another quick break. Okay, so capacity for police department, a number of people mentioned this one. There is a grant that we are looking at. And normally I would ask if there's any just general opposition, but Lindsay, your hand is up. Go ahead.
Yeah, again, process question. We don't normally approve the staff applying for grant on behalf of the city. So I'm not sure if that's what's going on here.
So I think it's a little confusing. Oh, you just locked up. Can you mute your turn your camera off? There. Can we hear you now? We cannot hear you. I don't know if you can hear us. Oh, wait a second. It's going to be a problem if he can't come back. Lindsay, we still can't hear you. I wonder if you can use the Connect Audio and call in, but link it. If you do Connect Audio, it will give you the number to call that will link your phone to your WebEx participation as a panelist. Wonder if you might be able to try that if you are not using your phone, which it didn't look like you were. Assuming you can hear us. And we just have to pause because we don't currently have a quorum without Lindsay. So we'll wait for him to come back.
May I make a recommendation? We take that 5-minute break?
Yeah, let's do the break. Well, wait. Try again, Lindsay.
Back.
Now nope. There, okay. Very good. You are muted currently. Can you hear us? This happened before. I don't know how to ask him. Mandy, can you message him and tell him that we're talking, but maybe he can't hear us? I know that that's helpful, but okay, let's take the 5-minute break, and if someone can help troubleshoot with him, I'll hurry back, but we might as well take the break real quick while we're still missing his participation.
Hey everyone, I switched to my phone and just wanted to do a mic check.
It's always fun to be back. Lindsay, we can hear you. We're still just wrapping up our break. So thank you. I'm glad you made that work.
Thank you. Yeah, I apologize. I don't know
That's
when I
okay.
cut
It
out.
happens. We just would have had to end the meeting. So I'm glad that you made it. You figured out a way to make it work.
Yeah, I didn't hear anything that was said after I commented about the first.
Nothing
referendum.
important because we realized pretty quickly that you locked up, and that was so we were still at the. What did you want to say? But really quickly, because we took a break, I just want to clarify that to your question about grants, I think the point of the revenue section is more, this is stuff that's already been approved. Is this still the direction we want to go? If not, now is the time to say we don't want to go this direction. So, or at least some of them. So do you want to speak again? Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't know where I cut off and I don't want to repeat what I said.
You said, something about it's not normal for us to approve staff pursuing grants. That's sort of where you left off.
Okay, yeah. So normally our staff, I guess I'll repeat what I said. Normally our staff write grants and then we would approve grant acceptance. Here, it looks like the proposal is to add new positions through a grant. And I'm not clear what happens if we no longer get that grant in the future. These are not revenue producing positions. So these aren't like hiring grant writers who are going to bring in more revenue and pay for themselves, which I treat as a different thing and I think is a worthwhile venture. In this case, I don't know fiscally what we would do if we no longer got this grant in the future and how that would affect the department. So I have a lot of concerns and I'm looking for more information.
Okay. Deputy Chief, would you like to take that? Or Serena, either one.
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
Okay.
To start. So in regard to the police department, rather than grants generally, we just included some of the things that we're currently doing to kind of meet some of those council goals. We do expect that the funding that's received from House Bill 2015 would continue for a number of years, and that we could then explore options to continue to ramp up funding for those positions. But we do expect that it would be kind of a long-term grant from what we understand.
That's my understanding too, if I understand the grant correctly. Lindsay, go ahead.
Yeah, and one of the things I learned about last week was call for service analysis, and I sent an email to Deputy Chief Vieta, Chief Smith, and others asking when we've last done a call for service analysis and when we've analyzed our response capacity in light of what we're being asked to respond to.
Are you asking when we last did one or if we are planning to do one? I just want to make sure.
But how about both questions?
Sure. Deputy Chief, do you know the answer to those questions?
I do not quite understand what Lindsay is asking.
Sure.
And I think that a future conversation between Chief Smith, Deputy Director Hatton, perhaps me, to more fully understand what type of analysis he's asking about would be helpful to allow us to answer that question.
Yeah, I can explain. A call for service analysis would look at why people call 911 in our city and what kind of response is best suited for addressing those issues. So when I've done ride-alongs with officers or sit-alongs in 911, I've seen calls come in that we don't really have the right resource mix for. I remember with an officer, we were trying to help somebody figure out how to apply for a job and kind of get his leg up to not be on the street. That's a great thing to be doing. That is not something that we need a armed officer trained in use of force to figure out. That's actually something we need a social worker for. Most of the calls I've seen that come in are things that we could add. What I've been advocating for, and I think a number of other people on council have been advocating for, is a crisis response team. And so a call for service analysis is a first step in looking at how do we manage our resources to best meet the needs of our community, and what are the ways that, if we're looking at adding more staff in the police department, more staff for public safety, how would we pick what kind of staff to add to make sure we're addressing the needs that our community actually has? Does that make sense?
I think so. I think I can say yes, it makes sense to me, but let's maybe you follow up with them when you get back, or follow up on your email.
Does that make sense to our deputy chief?
I understand what you're saying. And I understand, I think, what your point is. And I think the conversation that I described would be extremely helpful. I think what we currently have is a collection of procedures for, if this happens, then that is the response. And sometimes it is because police and fire and EMS are the exact right tool for the job. And sometimes it is because nobody knows who else to call. And so we end up going. I helped someone remove a dead deer from their yard the other day. Not sure I was the best person to call, but I was there. So that's a good example, I guess. Old-fashioned community-oriented policing, problem solving.
So when was the last time we've done a comprehensive call for service analysis, with professional analysts?
I'm still not sure that I understand what you're asking. I mean, I understand your words, but for example, every type of event has been analyzed by professionals, and the best plans to respond to those events that I think we can make have been made. So that type of analysis is ongoing. But as far as calling someone outside to look at what we do here, to give us their opinion about how we might respond to the various calls with the resources that we have, I don't know when or if that has been done.
Yeah, and what I'm sharing is that I sent an email to you and others last week, connecting you with researchers who do that work nationwide and are interested in helping cities like Port Angeles. And so I hope that we can respond to that. I obviously cannot direct you in what you do, but I will certainly follow up with Manager West at my next meeting. And I think we should look at our best practice options and look at best practices from other jurisdictions. And that's what I'm finding and recommending that we do. So in terms of adding other officers, I want to make sure we're doing it, from an evidence-based perspective, from a best practice perspective, and make sure we're actually responding to the needs of our community. I also want to make sure, even if it's a 3-year grant, the state revenue is dire, and there's no guarantee that stuff continues. So let's make sure that we're not staffing ourselves up in a way that we can't continue in the future. Thanks.
Thank you, Lindsay Navarro.
Just to follow up on, I think, what Lindsay was talking about a little bit, that, something that I've been very proud of for our department is in our public safety sphere, police and fire have really looked at upstream approaches through the creation of Rediscovery and the community paramedicine program, which has now vastly, evolved into something that is truly transformative for the community, right? And with Rediscovery, that now has been so successful that the county is now administering that, right? So great for them. And when that transition happened, what I said to Chief Smith was, what's next? what's the next upstream approach, just transformative thing that we are going to do? And I believe I testified in favor of this grant or in favor of this bill, specifically because it prioritizes funding for, and I'm reading off the list off of AWC here, emergency management planning, environmental hazard mitigations, which I think dead deer qualifies, community outreach and assistance programs, alternative response programs, and mental health crisis response. And those are things that our police department used to have efforts in doing. And I think as Lindsay's articulated, we know that, I think as talked about earlier, that there are strong efforts through our police department to do community policing. But I think it's also valuable to express that we can do community policing and also recognize that when somebody is having a mental health crisis, the police are not necessarily the right person to respond, right? When I worked at the Land Trust in that old bank building, which they're no longer at, but we would have a guy who used to live at the Tempest who would just walk around and talk to himself. And he was a little bit he was definitely a presence and somebody who, if you're walking down the street, you might switch to the other side of the street, right? And I asked our officers, hey, what's the story? Is this somebody we should lock the doors around or not? And what they told me was no, he's he's a pretty harmless guy, and he has schizoaffective disorder, schizophrenia, and but he's kind of harmless. He's you're gonna, not you're gonna be okay, don't do anything, but basically you're gonna be okay. You don't have to lock the doors around the guy. And and I think that shows that our folks who do safety work in our community know the people, but that guy was not dangerous, right? My question is this guy dangerous? Do I have to be worried? No, he's not. So why are we having somebody respond? Why are we having somebody with a gun respond to somebody who is largely nonviolent? And when people are calling the police about him, it's because he's jaywalking or because he's flailing his arms, but he's not violent, right? And people are calling because they're worried. They see somebody having a mental health crisis and in distress. And the right person to call for that is a social worker or a mental health professional. And I would encourage anybody who's thinking about becoming a police officer who wants to get in it to help solve those things is to look at social work, peer response, mental health work, because those are those efforts that really should be used in responding to a mental health crisis. It's a mental health professional. And we talk about this all the time with our police department, that we also, we have a lot of those calls, right? We also have sex offenders. We have violent assaults. We have domestic violence, right? And so I think what Lindsay's getting at is that we need to know not what could we do with our officers that we currently have, but if we're seeing that many of the calls that are made are about mental health response, then we need to stand up a public safety department in this city that responds as mental health professionals, like other cities around the country do. I think the most famous example and first is Eugene, Oregon, extremely successful program. There are others all throughout this country who have realized that the next upstream approach, and I think the next upstream approach for our city as people who are innovative and creative and finding solutions that don't yet exist here, is using these kinds of grant funds to stand up a mental health crisis response, an alternative response program, community outreach and assistance programs, or even an animal control program, which we don't have in this city, right? I don't even think we have it in the county. And so I think what I'm encouraging us to do is do an analysis to determine really where are our calls coming from so that we can determine adequately what our response is going to be. And I encourage our council and our staff to continue to think, what's next? Why don't we continue to be on the forefront, continue to be out in the front, recognized by the state as a model for other governments in Washington state to really be thinking about what does public safety look like in a I would say small, but medium-sized town, I think it's like continuing those practices that we've done and have been leaders on.
Thank you. Thank you both. So I guess my question is, do either of you, I don't know that my interpretation of what you said does not mean that we would not continue to pursue this. I will speak really quickly and then I'll go to you, Lindsay. I totally agree with Navarra that I think there's we can continue to be doing cool and innovative things. Cool is the wrong word, but innovative upstream solutions. And I think our staff know that that's something that we generally are supportive of. And I also think when we're thinking about the timeline, I'm certainly in favor of continuing to pursue the funding from this grant. And I appreciate the concern about adding officers that maybe the grant funding doesn't last and we lose that, but let's, and maybe by the time that comes around, we have identified something slightly different than 4 police officers and a record specialist. I think we do, my sense would be, and I can ask Deputy Chief for confirmation of this if necessary, but we're trying to roll in body-worn cameras, which is something that we've heard from our community are of interest. And certainly I think, I'm not a police expert, but it seems like current best practice, which creates a whole host of increased records management. And so I think certainly there's value in a record specialist. And if the funding is available for those things, I think I'm certainly in favor of continuing to pursue the funding. I also think in the short term, even just increasing staffing or using it to fill positions that might be open or whatever is important, because I think currently our call volume is very high. And I think much like fire, we're competing with other organizations. I think we have a great organization. I think a lot of people want to work for us, but when push comes to shove, if you can do the same job somewhere else for similar pay and maybe a slightly better work-life balance, that makes those departments more competitive, and then we're paying to train people to go work somewhere else. So I'm in favor of this and in favor of what you guys are talking about. Lindsay, sorry, yep, you had your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, it sounds like it's a large grant, multiple years, and has a lot of different potential uses. So based on the conversation, based on what we know, I feel like it is important for us to give direction instead of just talk, as the 3 of us have just done. So I move to direct staff to include and prioritize calls for service analysis and developing 24-hour crisis response team capacity through the House Bill 2015 grant application.
Second.
Okay, hold on. You said...
I will send the motion.
Okay, thank you.
But
that'd be great.
I can repeat it right now for the sake of everyone. I move to direct staff to include and prioritize calls for service analysis and developing 24-hour crisis response team capacity through the House Bill 2015 grant application.
Mayor?
Yes,
the
go
question. I think the motion as far as exploring the calls for service analysis, I think that's something we definitely would be interested in exploring. I think a challenge for staff is the second part of the motion, I think, says, and develop a 24-hour crisis response team. That, I think, would be something staff would feel more comfortable if it was explore a 24-hour crisis team, but a council motion here to direct staff to develop a new team, that would be a challenge for staff with our existing capacity. So we're happy to, I think, and would suggest the motion might be modified to say explore, but the motion as it's currently worded to develop would seem to give direction from council on how we staff within several layers down within the city family.
All right. Navarra and then Lindsay. No, Lindsay, go ahead.
Yeah, respectfully, the word explore basically eliminates the mandate from council. We have known for years that crisis response is a high need. We just don't know quite how big, and that's the reason for the calls for service analysis. But it's clear from all of our work, everything we've done, that we need something besides police or fire. And so we need to develop that. We've been working with Rediscovery. Our police department has been working very with them. And that is still just a daytime program. It really needs to be 24/7. And that is why we are directing our staff, not just encouraging our staff to do this. And so, changing it to explore basically changes it to nothing. It's our job to provide direction. Thank you.
Okay. So I am not opposed to what you're talking about, but I am not going to support the motion because I do think I'm not willing to, for better or for worse, I'm not willing tonight to say, let's definitely do that with only 4 council members. And I think something where I guess I would just like more, I'd like a little more time. So I'm just going to say that. Drew, go ahead, and then Navarra.
I disagree with having develop and would rather have explore myself. It seems almost contradictory to do a service analysis and then immediately in the same to find out what we need better so we use our resources more efficiently, while at the same time mandating we also develop a 24-hour crisis response team without actually looking at the service analysis that we're doing. So I would like to actually have the service analysis done while at the same time exploring doing a 24-hour crisis response. And should that exploring be lacking, once we have the service analysis done, we can very firmly direct staff to create a 24-hour crisis response team.
Lindsay? I mean, sorry, Navarra, go ahead.
I was just going to ask Kate if you would be comfortable with the language of explore as opposed to, because I would, if you're interested in that as well, I would make that amendment.
I would support explore.
Okay, I move to amend the main motion to strike the word direct and input the word explore.
I'll second.
All right. So we have a
Just
motion
a point
to
of clarification.
Yes.
I think the motion is intended to strike the word developing and then replace it with explore.
Thank you. Thanks, Lindsay. I appreciate that. That is in fact what I meant.
I think that's what I noted. So, okay. So we have a motion to amend the main motion to remove the word developing and replace it with the word exploring. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Okay. So the motion passes. So we have a main motion, move to direct staff to do a call for service analysis and move to direct staff to include and prioritize calls for service analysis and explore, I think actually is works. Explore 24-hour crisis response team capacity through the HB 2015 grant application. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Oh, I guess that was 4 of us. Motion passes. Okay. So capacity for the fire department. Go ahead, Navarra.
I move to continue staff conversations with fire agencies about a regional district and to continue to pursue grant opportunities to increase capacity.
Second.
Any discussion? Lindsay, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just note in our memo, it says at the end, if successful, these positions are offset by this grant for a period of 3 years, after which the city would build the personnel into the operating budget. The city has pursued this grant each year over the last several years. Could someone clarify if we've successfully pursued this grant over the last several years?
We have not been successful in obtaining this grant over the last several years.
Okay, so we're hopeful that we'll get the grant, but then we're building personnel into an operating budget, which we acknowledge at the top of this memo that it's all 1% down, not growing. So again, I have concerns about funding full-time permanent positions with temporary grants that will then become operating expense when our operating expense has a structural deficit in it.
So in this instance, that would only be built into the budget if we were to receive the grant. And just a reminder that a good portion of the personnel costs within our fire department are charged into our Medic One utility and could be built into a cost of service analysis at that time.
Do you have a follow-up, Lindsay?
Yeah, I mean, it's the goal for us as the city is to move expenses out of the general fund into utilities or other specialized funds. So yes, we can move it to Medic One. That then increases Medic One rates for our residents. And the question is how much can a board committee pay? So I'm going to vote in favor of this motion, which is to continue the conversation about regionalization. I think economy of scale is one place where we can build some efficiency in. We're a small area, we're a rural area, and to continue to pursue grant opportunities. I'm just saying somebody in the future is going to have to figure out where this cost falls.
Thank you, Lindsay. Did you want to say something, Deborah? No, okay. I will talk about this one because I was the one that said, hey, I think we should hire more firefighters. And I didn't say it that way. I did do a ride along. I talked to firefighters sitting around the table and asked the question, what do you need? And the very first thing they said was more firefighters. And so we talked about it, and I didn't feel like it was a pie in the sky. And they weren't complaining about staff at all, upline staff. It was just a matter of like, here's the reality. And I do listen to the scanner a lot. And there was a weekend day within the last 2 weeks where we had three advanced life support calls at the same time. So that's like someone is potentially actively dying, not a CPR in progress, but, and we certainly can't staff, not advocating that we staff for a worst case scenario on a 24-hour basis. But my concern is that the call volume is so high that the staff that we have are stretched thin, again, to my point about quality of life. And I think I do have concerns that if we do see an increase, which is what I talked about last time in multifamily housing, if there are, I think as we continue to grow, assuming that that's going to happen, that's an assumption I'm working under, that we are going to be at a point where we're going to be looking at, and we may be anyway, but what's the level of service that we're comfortable with? And so I'm not suggesting that we just keep adding and adding and adding, but this is an area where I do have concerns that people come here, they get trained, they go elsewhere because the calls for service, call volume is significantly less. And so I'm very supportive of the continued discussion about regionalization potential, what that might look like. I'm probably not articulating that quite right, but I'm glad that we're having those conversations. And I just mentioned staffing because I think we will find ourselves in the shorter rather than long-term looking at as a council having to potentially discuss what levels of service we're comfortable with the staffing that we have. And that doesn't feel very good. So if there's a way to make that, I'm going to stop talking, but so I'm going to support the motion. is my long way of saying that. Lindsay, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just briefly say, the whole conversation about satellite fire station on the far west side of town is a result of bad zoning, bad planning, where we put a bunch of high density housing on the very outskirts of town rather than in the center of town where it should be. If we plan right, we can put most of our residents within half a mile of the fire station. If we plan poorly, we will build apartment buildings and greenfield sites on the edge of town, and then we'll have very expensive health and safety services because we will be much more scattered. So, this stuff has consequences, and we are dealing so much with the consequences of bad decisions in the past. And the question is, are we gonna be bold and fix it? Again, I think we're all supporting this motion, but when we talk about multifamily, when we talk about apartments, we need to put them in the right place. We need to put them in the walkable center of Port Angeles, which is also happily exactly where our fire station is, the epicenter of walkability in Port Angeles.
Thank you, Lindsay. Okay, any further discussion? So we have a motion to recommend staff continue conversations with fire agencies about a regional district and to continue to pursue grant opportunities to increase capacity. Anyone opposed to the motion, please state your opposition. Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. Okay, go ahead, Navarra.
I have some concerns. I have stated this multiple times in the past, so I'm going to restate it. I do not support hiring a part-time business districts and neighborhoods advocate. I have never, and I continue to not. I've pulled up the strategic plan, and you'll notice that hiring a person to do business districts and neighborhood advocacy is nowhere in that, because we voted it down at the time, because we talked about it at the time, and we agreed at the time that we chose to pursue creating distinct neighborhoods, that we were not going to hire anybody at the city. I don't think that the city is the right place to have a community organizer, which this position seems to be. And I think it's a problem to have a neighborhood advocate be housed at the city. Hopefully the people advocating for their neighborhoods live in their own neighborhoods. And I think that's true as well for business districts. If I am misunderstanding the point of what this part-time new hire would be, then please feel free to explain it to me. But I will not be voting to support any money that goes to having somebody whose job it is just to liaise with business districts and neighborhoods. I think it will lead, as I said before, to increased disparity. And I think it will lead to the people who advocate the loudest to receive the most attention, which has been a historic challenge, I think not just for us, but for many other communities. And I think that as we are standing up our very beginnings of distinct neighborhoods, that we should give that space and time to develop organically rather than from a top-down approach. And instead, I think that there are other ways that we could actually foster greater civic engagement and economic development. I think it's worth noting that in the next two slides, so this one and then the last one, and I'm a little unclear about what a general government project manager would be. I'm sure it was discussed at the last meeting, and since I was not there, I do not know. But I think it's worth mentioning that the Parks Department and the Legal Department are the only two departments in the 5.5 years that I've been on council who have not received additional staffing. Are we kidding here? Our legal department, I think, is probably, now I'm biased, of course, but probably one of our most valuable parts of our parts of our city, because they help keep us on the straight and narrow. And in many other communities, there's a person whose job it is to write good code, right? And instead, we have outsourced that to an agency who when we hired them, we were told, oh, it'll be done in a year or two. And it's been 5.5 years. So my question is like, first, truly, what a waste of money. But second, had we had that service in-house, we would have been paying less for a person whose job it would be, who knows the community, to actually do that job. So I'm confident that business license fees cannot go, I'm pretty confident that they cannot go to a whole new legal person, and that's fine. And I understand the budget constraints, and I'm not advocating that we in this budget hire a new lawyer, especially if you've seen the salary description for the lawyer to not replace Bill, but to be the subsequent bill for us. Lawyers, they ain't cheap. So I'm not advocating that for this budget, but I do think that I pulled it up right in our strategic plan with community resilience and infrastructure development, maintenance, and connectivity. And, our Parks Department is a huge and very valuable part of those, of making those things a reality. And I think, personally, I want to live in a community where we have strong parks, where we have our park infrastructure reflects the beauty of our community. And while we just talked about street trees, there are many parks in this town where they're just fields, and that we could do stronger development, probably through additional staff capacity, to make sure that every family in every neighborhood, right, to get back to the point about this neighborhood stuff, is that some neighborhoods are treated better than others. And some neighborhoods have state-of-the-art parks with incredible infrastructure, where people travel from other neighborhoods to go to those parks, right? And if you're so lucky to live in that neighborhood, then I'm very glad for you. And I live in a neighborhood with one of those parks. But if you live 8 blocks down the road, the only park is a deserted field, right? Why is that part of the neighborhood any less deserving than our part? So I think we have to talk about the ways that we can actually, if we're actually looking to foster greater civic engagement and economic development, I think it's through other avenues than this specific position that is placed in the budget. And I certainly don't have a problem with another public records assistant. I don't have a problem with that for our police department as well. And I don't have a problem with a citywide homeless navigator either. I mean, it's very clear that we should be doing more at the city level to address housing and homelessness. And I think that those are really key ways, especially as we know that many of our park staff end up being sort of the frontline staff who are working with our houseless community and residents. And so I think, right, again, like to the Parks Department, I think it's very valuable to be having, to be creating positions that are community care focused and oriented, and just beefing up the departments that I think sometimes get left out of the conversation, especially when, like, how can you compete with fire and police? And I mean, everything you said, Kate, I agree with you. And so I think we have some of these departments, even like community, CED, like has had very strong increases, which are very valuable and I'm very glad about. But I think it's time that we talk about what we could use that money for in a slightly different way that I think would achieve some of the same goals.
Thank you, Navarro. We'll go to Lindsay and then Drew.
Yeah, well, for the reasons Councilmember Carr stated, I agree about the second bullet on this item of new part-time staff positions. I actually disagree with the other two as well. I see when community members approach me about different issues that when they try to get information from our staff that should be very easy to share, a very common staff response kind of across our departments is, oh, would you like me to turn that into a public records request? Rather than just answer the question. We saying we want to enhance transparency, but I see instead we're, building Kafka's castle and saying, oh, we're going to turn them to public records requests and we'll get back to you in 6 weeks. So I think we're making a lot of work for ourselves instead of just being transparent with people and our constituents and answering people's questions when they ask those questions, rather than forcing people into public records in order to get information from the city that our staff could easily share. So that's what I hear from community members. I don't think we need a public records assistant. I think we're making busy work for ourselves. As far as the third item, a citywide homelessness navigator, I struggle to understand what the city would be doing with this position instead of just basically sending them to meetings and doing really what Seattle started doing of saying, oh, hey, you're going to call, we're going to send out our homelessness navigator to tell people to move along. And that is not solving anyone's problem. The solution when we have people who can't afford rent is to bring down the cost of rent. And we as a city do that by housing policy. That's why we have a new housing position that we've made full-time and permanent. And, that's potentially where we should be investing our resources. It is the county, not the city, that manages the homelessness crisis response system. So I disagree with bullets 1, 2, and 3, and I move to postpone indefinitely these items that are included under phase 2 business licensing.
Second.
Okay, quick clarification. Are you suggesting pausing the phase 2 business licensing altogether or just the revenue sources?
Honestly, I don't understand
just
why
where they're going.
Phase 2 business licensing isn't really mentioned on this slide. It's these 3 white bullets that are the new positions that are mentioned there. I'm not talking about pausing business licensing, but this slide is about 3 new part-time positions, and that's what I'm proposing to postpone, or the motion is to postpone.
Okay.
Mayor.
I'm going to go to Calvin, and then I need to go to Drew because he wanted to speak, and now we've probably missed your opportunity.
Just a little background that might be helpful. So on November 6th of last year, Council approved Ordinance 3737, which implemented a city general business license. That ordinance was passed on a 5-to-1 vote. There was a member who voted no, and there was a member who were absent. As part of that motion that passed on a 5-to-1 vote, the council in the motion specifically listed a phase 1 and a phase 2 for revenues that would be generated by the implementation of that new general business license. Phase 1, which we have already implemented, was to fully support the downtown resource officer and a second permanent full-time code enforcement officer. The slides that are being referenced and the 3 bullets are part of the motion that was passed on a 5-to-1 vote for the second phase. And there was concerns that the revenue may not be as forthcoming as was estimated. So we specifically implemented phase 1 when the revenues came in, and then phase 2 would wait to see how future revenues. And the 3 items on this list were part of your council approved motion. And so staff took that direction from the November 6th meeting and have provided those verbatim as to what was on slide 31 for anybody who might remember as part of the phase 2. So just a little context and background.
All right, thank you. Drew, go ahead.
Yeah, so I have a couple of things that I wanted to address with this. First off, with the part-time business district and neighborhoods advocate, I think the wrong side of that equation, from my interpretation and my intent of it, is being focused on. The neighborhoods advocate was more of an add-on that was suggested. The part-time business district is also weird phrasing. What this actually is intended to do is over a decade ago, 14, 15 plus years, we had staff attend PABA, PADA, chamber, et cetera, both to act as, and yes, to sit in on the meetings, to then be able to respond directly at that time to why are we doing things or how do we answer this question, but also to be able to bring back stuff from staff to council. In fact, I knew Nathan West, city manager, prior to being involved with this because he was the liaison for the Downtown Association when I was a board member. So I know that the city has a history of being able to work closer with different business organizations, not necessarily business districts. And that's what I was advocating to see brought back. In this capacity, that does not necessarily inherently need to be a new part-time position. If we have staff hours that can be put towards that with increased pay, I'm okay with that as well. The intent is to actually have someone out there doing that again, recognizing that we as council members cannot attend every single meeting, and having a single point of contact to be able to attend all those is important to me. My interpretation and understanding as far as the record requests and all the training I've received is if someone asks something, it's a records request, and now I got to go through the records request process. If there's a way to quickly answer something and not run afoul of not treating it like a records request, I am happy for training to be able to do that. I would like to be able to give someone an answer right this second and not turn it into a 30, 60, 90-day process. But all of the training that I've received so far has basically said, if it sounds like a records request, it's a records request, and you have to go through it to make sure the city is not held liable for not giving them absolutely everything. So if there is a way to not do it that way, so we can quickly answer them, I would love to see a way to be able to do that. And then my final thought was just not so much a follow-up, but also to reemphasize that in the original motion made for the business licensing, we did identify these three things as what those funds would be used for.
All right, I will chime in and acknowledge that for some reason, I feel like it's 10 o'clock, even though it's only 9, but we've been at this for a while. It's important, I realize, but I'm of the mind that right now, the question, we do have a motion, which can you repeat the motion for me, please?
The motion is to postpone indefinitely the 3 positions that are on the phase 2 business licensing slide.
Okay, so I'm inclined to not support the motion, not because I don't think it's worth revisiting. We did vote for that. We've already talked tonight. Doesn't mean we have to say, yep, that's exactly what we can't be whiplashing staff, but I don't want to spend the time tonight to find out whether we're making progress on that or not. But I do think we should decide. Anyway, I'm not inclined to support the motion the way it is. I'm happy to have further discussion about those positions. And I think we want to have them probably before we include phase 2 in the budget, which makes the timeline problematic. So, but we still have another budget work session. I'm not going to support the motion as it currently is stated because I want to make sure that we move forward on 2, but I also don't want to whiplash staff. I'm happy to have a further conversation about it in the future. And Lindsay, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, we're the legislative branch of government and we get to decide what we need to do to staff our city, right? So we were elected by the people, our staff wasn't. And, deciding to add these positions is not prudent right now. Maybe it made sense when we passed that motion, maybe it didn't. But now I look at these and I don't think they make sense. As far as public records go, what I hear from constituents are questions that they asked that are not requests for records, but are turned into requests for records rather than simply answered. So if somebody asks a question that is not, I want your records, but like anything other than give me your records, like it doesn't have to be a records request. And it, yeah, for all the reasons here. So, motion to postpone indefinitely means we're putting these aside. We're in different economic condition. These, are kind of like luxury goods. We're not in a position to be taking these things. So let's set them aside. Let's do that now to not give that whiplash to our staff.
Fair point. Okay, so we have a motion to postpone. Sorry, can you repeat it one more time? I'm sorry.
Yeah, motion to postpone indefinitely the consideration of the 3 positions that are on the phase 2 business licensing slide.
Okay, thank you. And I'll just clarify that I'm not opposed to revisiting them. I don't want to postpone indefinitely. So that's why I'm not going to support the motion. Okay, so we have a motion to postpone indefinitely the consideration of the 3 positions on the phase 2 business license slide. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
No.
Can I ask a point of clarification?
Yes.
Mayor Dexter, are you interested in tabling?
I would be willing to table because I want us to, I'm just worried about it. Let me, if I may, I'm going to ask a question of staff about what it would look like if we postponed, is there a reasonable timeline for us to come back and discuss this within the budget process? Obviously, we have another budget work session and things like that. So in theory, yes, but I just wanted to check in on that.
Yeah, so currently for phase 2, this would be something that would be included in the budget only if the revenues come in higher than what the need is for phase 1. And so what staff could do is essentially just have a placeholder in the budget that says, we expect the revenue to be about this much more, and then council could make a decision on how they wanted to move forward with that.
Okay, so in that case, yes, I agree with what Serena said. So I'm fine postpone. I guess then it doesn't matter if we postpone it indefinitely because you'll bring it back to us at that point anyway.
Mayor and council, the motion could be, if council so desired, direct staff to create a line item of the anticipated phase 2 revenue and preserve the discussion as to how the revenue would be allotted as part of the council budget work session.
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second, Lindsay.
All right, thank you. I'm gonna see if I can repeat that properly. Were you raising your hand? No. Okay. So direct staff to create a line item for phase 2 business license revenue and bring back for council discussion. How did you say that? Well, then I'm going to say what I'm going to say, and then if it's basically right. So direct staff to create a line item for phase 2 business licensing revenue and bring back for council discussion use of said revenue beyond the need for phase 1 expenses or projects. Okay. So all those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Okay. 3-1. Okay. I don't remember this general government project manager, but probably someone brought it up. So I'm just going to ask for clarification because I think other people have the question too.
Yeah, so this would be a project manager that would primarily only work on projects that are general government in nature, things like parks and some of those kind of just miscellaneous general government projects like the housing pipeline study and whatnot. If there were needs for project manager, they would focus primarily on that. And so we're just kind of identifying that those are the types of projects that would be within that position.
Thank you. I'm remembering now the discussion about that just for a little more context, I think, particularly for Navarra, that Public Works that has a lot of projects, but they have people whose job is to manage that. And so then when you have parks, for example, they don't have someone whose job is to do that. And so creating someone who would act in that capacity for projects within the general fund is what this is talking about. So I will not speak first except for that clarification. Lindsay, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, when we say project manager, are we thinking of that project also including the grant process in order to bring in revenue to do more projects? Or is this really just implementing the projects we have, not, I guess probably there's grant reporting, but not necessarily going out and getting more funds?
So I think initially it would be moving projects forward, considering that we do have a backlog, but potentially for the future, it could also be looking at some grant funding and helping assist with applying for grants and whatnot.
Do you have a follow-up, Lindsay, or a different thought?
Yeah, I guess my follow-up is I think there's still benefit in pursuing grants managers as force multiplier, to use a term from earlier in the conversation. You have to spend money to make money to some degree, and that I think is still a worthwhile venture, despite the current federal system that is quickly destroying our capacity to operate and destroying the U.S. economy itself. But I'm not quite clear on, where this falls. So I guess I'll defer to the staff recommendation of grant funding being identified. I think the question that I keep having is do we have enough staff identifying grant funding? Are we swimming in grant funding that we don't have the capacity to apply for? Or are we under capacity for applying for grant funding?
I could take that one, if that's okay. So it's a great question, actually. I would say that Public Works, through our grant writer, we do support multiple departments with grant assistance. I do have Anina go out and she does meet with folks when potential grants come up, and we do what we can to assist them. Not all grants are apples to apples. Some of them are very time sensitive, but also very time burdensome. Some take a lot more steps, a lot more process than others do. So we do have to be somewhat selective in is the juice worth the squeeze, so to speak? Is it worth spending 10% of our capacity pursuing some of these? So that is something that we're actively she comes and speaks with me, and we talk with other directors to determine if it's worth our while or not. Yeah, I mean, this proposed position here is somewhat acknowledging that, right? We have limitations in what we can do with our current abilities, right? So if more grants come up, and we have what limitations we have within the general fund. So it's not to say that we can't use the staff that we have. It's just we're going at the pace that we currently can. And if council's direction is we would like to see you go faster, then that's where the additional staff comes in. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. Corey, go ahead.
Yeah, a lot of the projects that we have are funded projects within the CFP that we just can't get to. We have to try and get a project manager through Public Works, and sometimes that's not always easy because they have a lot on their plate as well. And so in-house, we would want to look at, helping. There's many projects police and fire need help on too. I don't have the capacity to manage those as well. But we do still have in-house, I'm juggling 5 grants right now, but it's really hard to go for more when you don't have someone that can manage the projects and close out that grant process. So that's kind of how this position came about.
Thank you. Navarro, go ahead.
I really appreciate the clarification from everybody. And I think as it sounds like, for me, it's yes, and I think that's sort of where Lindsay was going to, of saying yeah, great project manager. And also maybe let's build in some of the grant stuff into that too. Kind of what we did with Courtney's position, right? natural resource specialist and grants manager. And I think that there's like potential to have sort of that like yes and approach to this position as well, to make it clear that there is an element of the sort of the grant aspect here, because I think, you know, like I think everybody on council was really excited and glad when we were able to add in the natural resources and grants manager position, and acknowledge as well that, right, as everybody has spoken to, that like still we're not really achieving what we had hoped, you know, like at the scale we had hoped to with that position, right? Because there's just so much work to do. And so I think like I'm very supportive of this position moving forward. And I just hope that as we think about what the job description is, that we can just hopefully get somebody with grant application skills as well as grant project management skills. And it seems like that is what sort of everybody is sort of saying. So yeah, I'll leave it there. Lindsay has his hand up.
Before I go back to you, Lindsay, Drew, do you want to chime in? No? Okay. Lindsay, go ahead.
Yeah, compared to the 3 positions we were just discussing, 3 part-time positions, to be clear, to me, this is a higher priority. And I think this builds our capacity better. I'm not quite sure how to make the motion. If it was clear that I moved to go faster, as our public works director just said, I would make that motion, but I don't think that's a clear motion. But right now, the staff recommendation is to include this position in the budget only if grant funding is identified in 2026. I would rather prioritize this position over the 3 ones that we've listed under phase 2 business licensing, because I think this actually gives us the capacity to do more than those other 3 positions will. So that's my position. If it's useful to figure out a way to formulate that motion, I will try to do, but I would rather see this prioritized.
Okay, I'm going to jump in. I also like this idea, and I actually feel like this is one position where grant funding is a reasonable thing to use, not necessarily from an employment perspective, but from a city need perspective, because we'll take it as long as we can get it. And we could move some projects forward and chip away at our CFP, particularly the funded projects, so we don't lose funding. And so I realize it would need grant funding, and we've talked a lot tonight about grant funding positions, but this is one where I think if it's for 3 years, then we have someone to help for 3 years, and maybe they find some grants to go after so they can keep working longer, and that would be great. A lot of grants do allow some staffing built in, so maybe we consider how that might work. I think if I understood, just responding to Lindsay, your comment about the 3 in the business licensing, my understanding from Serena is this would just be if there's extra phase 2 business licensing. So it certainly wouldn't, in the short term, I'd rather have a motion that has the staff recommendation the way it is and not tie it to the phase 2 business licensing at all. Even if you say out loud that this is a priority, I would support a motion that is what the staff is recommending. And I will go back to you.
Yeah, I think what we've done at this point on council is we have, through the ordinance for the phase 2 business licensing, directed our staff to work on those 3 part-time positions. I don't know that we've made a direction to create this general government project manager. And so staff are appropriately doing what we told them to do previously. And I'd like to find a way to say, under the circumstances we see ourselves in today, this seems more important than that previous stuff.
Okay. Navarro, go ahead.
Okay, I'll take a stab at it. I move to include this position in the budget if grant funding is available, and prioritize finding funding for this position. Does that get us there? Okay.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion. Okay, just checking in. We have a motion to include the general government project manager position in the budget if grant funding is identified and prioritize finding grant funding for the position. It's clear. Let's see. Anyone opposed to the motion, please state your opposition. Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. Okay, that's the end. We made it. I know it's getting late. I need a quick break, and then we have item E4, and then I'm going to suggest that we skip council reports, and that gets us theoretically, I hope, to public comment on time. So we'll take a quick break and come back for E4. That's currently J2, previously E4, equipment purchase, the tractor. All right, we need to get started again. So you're here. All right. You all right?
I was like jamming.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm glad that didn't happen.
That'll wake you up.
That's right. All right. We are on the last item under it's the item under contracts and purchasing, currently J2, previously E4. And that is the Kubota tractor that we've heard about tonight. So I'm going to go to Director Curtin for that.
Madam Mayor, thank you very much. Council, on page E22 within the packet, as was mentioned, this is the Parks and Rec Kubota tractor, 20-year-old tractor that was brought before council about a month ago. We have done some additional investigations, just looking into the equipment and kind of where we are and how we got to where we are. Some new information tonight is, there's $30,000. I did do some research and find out we've expended $30,000 in maintenance and repairs. Most of them were not major. We had one $10,000 that was done towards the front end repairs to the tractor. The other $20,000 are, I would say, are more routine in nature, things of hydraulics and just other ongoing maintenance that you'd really expect with any piece of equipment. No major catastrophes or engine replacements or anything of that nature. But again, $30,000 in repairs over the life of 20 years. The tractor is generally used daily, 6 months out of the year. Parks and Rec Director Delicat is here. I'll have him elaborate on that a little bit as well. This purchase, was included in our CFP plan. We are getting it through a Washington State cooperative purchasing agreement, which actually is pretty competitive. We're actually, this proposed purchase is 10% less than what we asked for within the CFP. And then we do intend to surplus the old tractor, and we're anticipating getting 7 to 15% of that purchase price, between $3,500 and $7,500, returned to us through the surplus of that tractor as well. I would like to say, I do fully appreciate, the concerns and making sure that we are spending money effectively. This tractor for the Parks and Rec Department, it is one of two. They don't have 5, they don't have 6. This is one of 2 tractors. As someone new here in the community, I drive around, we just had the Cal Ripken ball tournament here over at the parks, thousands of people in town. Fields they looked fantastic, really impeccable. Last Monday, I attended a lefties game, my first lefties game, and same thing, just chatting with folks out there. The property's phenomenal, looked great. Last Saturday was my first trip across the Coho Ferry to Victoria, so I got to see what's on the other side of the water, and certainly that's another animal over there. They've got deeper pockets than we do, but I do believe in a lot of pride within our community as well. So after looking at the tractor, understanding, I fully appreciate and respect, concerns looking at what we are purchasing. I just, in my professional opinion, has not changed on this. I think this is an appropriate purchase to make. I don't think that this is an extravagant purchase, and we're getting outside of the bounds on what we're doing here to support Corey's mission in what they do. I think when you look at this piece of equipment, $50,000 and over 20 years, that translates to $2,500 a year, $200 a month. When I drive around and I look at our parks and I look at the quality of them, does $200 a month seem like an unreasonable number to me? Towards that end, and in this instance, it just doesn't to me. So my opinion hasn't changed. And before I read through the recommendation that we have, I know some questions are going to be asked of Corey. I just like to defer to him and let him add to anything I've had to say. But I fully support him in this purchase.
Thank you. And you don't need to read the recommendation. We have it in front of us. So, Corey, go ahead.
Well, I'll be the first one to tell you, I'll go on record that I am no mechanic whatsoever. So this is why I trust our service garage and our public works director. But I can tell you that there was some questions about how the tractor's stored. I could clarify that. For the first probably 10 years of its life, it was over on 16th Street. That was covered until a tree smashed our shop. We've been in 4 other buildings since then. I can say that at least half of them have places where we can store it inside. We have other places within the city that we can store it inside as well. And so it does move around a lot. But Scott makes a good point. If that tractor would have went down trying to get ready for that state tournament, we would have been in a scramble because then we would have had to go get the tractor from Civic, and that tractor was being used all weekend for the events going on over there. So anytime we have something break down, it's kind of especially on a weekend, it's really tough. But I can also tell you that the 9 attachments that we already have for our other tractor will fit on the new tractor. And so that's a huge bonus because they'll be the same exact ones. We are using the tractors a lot more, assisting the street division of Public Works during snow events. So we're constantly utilizing those for parking lots and things of that nature, helping out the police department, helping out the fire department with their snow event as well. So that's all I have to add, and I'm happy to take any other questions.
Thank you, Corey. Lindsay, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I appreciate those explanations. Saying you don't get ball fields like that, I mean, I'll pay $200. I mean, that's not the full cost. So if all we have to do is pay $200, great, I'm fine with that. But like, it's somewhat disingenuous to say that product is the result of $200. It's only one of multiple tools that went into that. The part that I'm hung up on is how we get 1,610 hours over the course of 20 years when I use this daily for half the year. I mean, I did the math back in June, and it was 12 minutes a day. I guess if we're using it for half a year, that's 24 minutes a day. We're driving it for less than half an hour a year. Is that accurate? Sorry, driving it for less than half an hour a day for half the year. Is that how much we're using it?
Well, let's see. We have 2 tractors. So one kind of stays on one side of town, one stays on the west side of town. And we're constantly using them. Now, we use them in sporadic because it just depends on the time of year, right? Because we have multiple attachments that do multiple things throughout the year. So the summertime, spring and summer is when we use that thing constantly, daily.
Right, but you've got the 1,610 hours. It's in our memo over 20 years. So you're not constantly using it, or the number's wrong.
I can't speak to the hours. I just know how much they're used.
Okay, but you've told us they're used 1,610 hours over the last 20 years. Is that right?
I think what Corey said is he doesn't know that. That's not a part of what he keeps track of. But I'll go to Scott.
Then where'd that number come from?
Yeah, so my understanding that is the hours that come off the machine. And my assumption is that is correct. I'm not going to sit here tonight and say that gauge is incorrect or not. I don't know that to be the case. That piece of equipment, again, it's not used year round, necessarily on a daily basis, but it does get moved around. So in the course of an 8-hour day, it's probably not often that it's going to go 8 hours necessarily in one day because of the work that it's doing. Staff are using it and then likely loading it, moving it to another location and things like that. I would also suspect it's not uncommon that, a newer piece of equipment is used more early in its life than it is later. Older equipment tends to be in for service more often, and those service repairs tend to take it out of service for longer periods of time. Our fleet shop here recently, we've had 3 mechanics. We've had some other issues. We've been down, honestly, we've been down to 1 a few occasions with some staff illnesses and vacations and things like that. So some of these, pieces of equipment coming and going from the fleet maintenance take longer, which is another thing that we take into consideration when we're looking at these things. So, but even with all that said, it's not to say that this piece of equipment, you couldn't put in another engine, you couldn't invest another $10, $20, $30,000 into this, and then have, a piece of equipment that you've got $100,000 into that was worth $50,000 when it's new, but it's still 20 years old at that point. And I just, as someone that does this and has done this for 20, 25 years, this just doesn't pencil to me. It's not to say that others wouldn't, but this particular one in this instance with what we do, what the mission is, the fact that we only have 2, it just doesn't make sense to me to not buy this and to try and limp along with a 20-year-old piece of equipment.
What would you do if you didn't have this equipment? I mean, for that half hour a day that this equipment's used, how would you do this work?
So that's a great question. And again, and this is the case with any of our stuff, right? So if we have 2 and you go down to 1, that 1 has its limitations. So, and it would be a very different case if Corey was maintaining 1 100-acre park and it didn't have to move around town. But he has, and I'm not going to speak for him. I don't know how many parks that he actually has. I know it's a lot. And my guess would be that he would be prioritizing those areas, and some of those would not get done. I mean, that's just a reality of the situation. That's what would happen on my end. If I had a piece of equipment, if a vac truck went down, something like that, we would have certain things that just would not be able to get done while we pursued either contracting that work out through somebody else or other means. And historically, that is not less expensive. That's not cheaper for the city, from my experience.
Thank you. Let's go to Drew.
Yeah, I just had some questions and comments regarding the actual, where'd my notes go? About the purchasing cooperative. So I know we typically go through the purchasing cooperative. Correct me if I'm wrong. I assume that the reason why we typically do that is because it requires fewer staff hours and typically is just a more efficient process. They're already by nature more competitive. Do we know if most of the local companies in town, Hartnagel's, Swain's, I assume POE, and the like, are they listed on the state's purchasing cooperative?
So that's a great question. I appreciate you bringing that up. And there is no question that this is somewhat unique with the city. This is one thing that we don't have as a city, which does have ramifications. We don't have a centralized purchasing department that all these things run through, right? So fleet and things that runs through each department director to get the items that they need. Stuff that's over $35,000 makes its way through the CFP plan. Purchases less than that they don't. They just run through a different purchasing process that is managed by the directors. The process that we follow is detailed in Chapter 3.05 of our municipal code. It gives us parameters based on the complexity of the purchase that we're buying. The benefit of purchasing off of Sourcewell in the Washington state is they've already gone through a competitive process. So they've kind of narrowed the field for you already. So they've kind of vetted the player, so to speak, on a wide range of equipment. That prevents us from having to comply with our procurement policy, from the need of having to go and stand up an entire procurement to go out and advertise and bid. And those average procurements, when you look at the number of staff hours involved, we're $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 to stand one of those up, get it advertised, put it out on the street, manage that whole process coming back and forth. Especially when we're doing multiple other capital, procurement purchases throughout the process. So there's no question the timing, limitations on staff resources, things like that. Huge benefit in doing that. There's multiple ones that we look at. The Kubotas, I can tell you that to my knowledge, the only Kubota dealer I'm aware of. There's one in Silverdale. There's others, within the state. that I've seen, but generally the ones that make it to those contracts are the ones that are in the business of serving government agencies and municipalities and things like that. That's how they end up there. So it's not to say that a local one could not. They're free to compete, and it gets scored. It runs through any other normal competitive process, and I would certainly encourage anyone to put themselves out there and chase those opportunities. Absolutely.
And just as a follow-up towards council, I would recommend that we at some point go back and look if there's a way that perhaps CED can push for more local businesses to get listed on the state's website. I know, I believe it was the county hosted all the different state agencies for newer businesses to come to Port Angeles a few months ago that I was able to attend, and they actually went over that process. It's not that difficult. I can be listed because I can sell books to the library. So just making sure that all of the local businesses recognizing the additional costs associated with us doing our own RFP versus using the state site. I recognize the importance of that. But I also then want to make sure that anyone local has the opportunity to be listed on there and has a chance to put in a bid as well. So if there's at some point a discussion that could be made of how can we push that as an informational based thing, I'd like to see if we could have that.
I think that was MRSC because they were in charge of the small works roster. But they did not, that money, if I remember correctly, was not renewed by the state. So who knows what will come with that. Navarra, did you want to speak to this? Okay. I'm going to speak to this. I appreciate the concerns that have been raised. And my thought is, I think I appreciate staff's articulation of why this is in front of us. And I think regardless of where we are now, based on Corey's articulation of ways that we could use this new tractor, it does have crossover capacity with the parts we already have. We talked about it the last time. To me, that makes it a compelling thing to move to because it improves efficiency in a way that I think is really beneficial. And I do think, we are seeing more snow events, and having two pieces of equipment that can share parts, I think, and be used more year round is beneficial to the community. And I mean, I agree we shouldn't just throw things away because they're old, but I think, I drive an old car. It's a 2004, so it's 21 years old now. It's a year older than my son. I certainly am fine using things for a long time, but there is a point at which there's some diminishing return in keeping it. And I just happen to have a Honda and I haven't hit that point yet. So fingers crossed that it lasts a little longer. Anyway, all right. So in order to do anything about this, we would need a motion. Oh, Lindsay, your hand is up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll wait till somebody makes a motion.
Does anyone want to make a motion? It's on page E22.
I move that we approve the purchase of a new Parks Department piece of equipment, 2025 Kubota L4060 HST tractor that is the functional equivalent of the existing equipment number 5330 from Jennings Equipment of Puyallup, Washington. Yes. For an amount not to exceed $49,633.93, including tax and accessories, and authorize the city manager to approve, execute the final purchase documents to complete the purchase and to make minor modifications as necessary, and authorize the city manager to surplus equipment 5330 and to dispose of that equipment in a commercially reasonable manner upon addition of the equipment.
Second.
All right, thank you. Lindsay, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not going to support the motion, and I'll explain why. I'll make an analogy. In Mexico City, you see crews of street cleaners with really big brooms or picking up trash. They're cleaning up the street. They're able to get into the narrow spaces that a complex city has, working around columns and stuff in cities, intersections that we frankly can't do those kinds of traffic calming things because we just use big pieces of equipment. That's what I've heard from our staff. we'd have to like, sorry, our equipment couldn't get around the traffic calming, so we're not going to make our intersections safer by putting these bollards, out, in the street. I'm not trying to say labor costs are the same between Mexico and the United States. I totally understand that that's not a fair analogy, but we don't even make an effort here to think about what our alternatives would be. We asked, it was like, oh, we struggle with one of these things. Well, what if we had none of these? How would we do this? Like, it's used on average half hour a day for half the year. We're not even calculating, well, what's the cost of an employee to, walk a wheeled version of these different aerators or lawn maintenance things around the same area? Like, how much more would that cost than having a tractor that we maintain all the time? We're not doing that kind of analysis because we're stuck in we have to have the industrialized version of how to run a city rather than potentially looking at the human version of how to run a city. And so I want us to be doing more of those alternatives and looking at the actual cost benefits and comparing them. And we don't do that. And we continue to not do that. And until we as the council say, you have to do that, then our staff are going to continue to do that. The other thing is, after knowing that we had objections and questions about this got put into our consent agenda. That was inappropriate and categorically shouldn't have happened. So again, I expect the 3 council members in chamber to vote yes. I don't think we should do this. And I think our staff should tell us what would happen if they didn't. And let's find out. It's not a crisis. We're talking about maintaining grass. So I vote no.
Thanks, Lindsay. I will take responsibility in part for it being on the consent agenda because procedurally it met the criteria. I fully expected it to be pulled, but I review the agendas and I let it be there because it meets the criteria and figured it was really easy to pull it. That's why that's my part of why I left it there and didn't ask for it to just be separate. That was my rationale, for what it's worth. All right, so we have a motion. Any further discussion? Sorry. No? Okay. We have a motion to approve the purchase of new Parks Department piece of equipment 2025 Kubota L4060 HST tractor that is the functional equivalent of existing equipment number 5330 from Jennings Equipment of Puyallup, Washington, for an amount not to exceed $49,633.93, including tax and accessories, and authorize the city manager to approve and execute the final purchase documents to complete the purchase and to make minor modifications as necessary, and authorize the city manager to surplus equipment number 5330 and to dispose of that equipment in a commercially reasonable manner upon addition of the equipment. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
All right, the motion passes. Thank you.
Madam Mayor.
It can't.
No.
It can't.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but this is
Yeah.
a motion to spend money.
Yes, it can't. It can't pass 3-1. So
It requires
Great,
4
thank you.
votes.
Can we clarify
Yes.
the rule? It's 4 votes regardless of the number of council members, or what exactly is the rule for this?
yeah, hold on, I have it in front of me. Sorry. It is under the well, Bill, you can probably speak to it faster than I can find the note that you sent that I have in my folder here. Here it is. An affirmative vote of 4 council members is required for the following actions. Any resolution for payment of money. It's a RCW requirement because it's not, needs to be a majority of the body and not a majority of those present. So we should have just waited to talk about it because we didn't have a majority. But okay, so the motion technically can't pass because we don't have 4. So it does not pass currently. So we will discuss what to do going forward and potentially revisit it at another meeting. All right. Well, that was fun. That brings us to, we haven't had that happen before where we've had interesting numbers. So apologies for the misstep there. All right. I'm going to suggest that we skip council reports because it's already 9:46 and we need to get to second public comment period, but I will go to staff really quickly for city manager report. There's a couple of things I think that are worth saying out loud.
Thank you, Mayor. Very quickly, 2 items. Reminders that first, the city-sponsored Rainier Mill Cleanup Forum is next week on 7/22 from 5 to 7:30 p.m. here in these chambers. We'll have several presentations, and there will be an opportunity for the public to weigh in on this critical issue. Second, applications are being accepted until 8/4 at 4 p.m. for the vacant Council 7 position. Information on how to apply is available on the city's website or by contacting the city clerk's office. Thank you.
And day of play, the 26th of July.
Most importantly, day of play. Thank you for the wind-up.
All right. Second public comment period. If you're online, this is time to raise your virtual hand. We'll do in council chambers first. Name whether or not you're a resident and go.
I'll make it quick. Hi, John Ralston, City Port Angeles resident. One of the council people tonight spoke passionately in their conversation about traffic safety. I think that's terrific, including those people in bicycles and people in carriages, etc. I hope that when there's a traffic study done, that they'll do a count of bicyclists and see if there's a frequency of use in some counts. Second item, we hear about affordable housing, and I just want to tell you about 2 projects that I've gone through the pre-application meeting on, and basically went fine, other than I'm not going to complete the projects. One of them is to build 6 duplexes on my property over near 8th and I, pretty much okay by most departments. However, I'm required to put in over 1,200 lineal feet of sidewalk and ADA ramps. And there's no fee in lieu. It's not going to happen at this point in time unless the city can find some solutions for me. Second one was a 2-unit townhouse that I was going to do up near Angeles Millworks in that general area. It falls into this complicated issue with the CSO issues. And I've been told through, again, pre-application meeting that I need to spend close to $5,000 to do a CSO study. And you don't know what that CSO study is going to say. You may need to spend another $5,000 to do this, $10,000 to do this, 20. Don't know what the number is. It's not worth it to me to spend $5,000 to have some unknowns. So again, the project sits on the sideline. Good news is I just broke ground on another project just for a townhouse up near Hamilton School, and I have other things going that are away from the CSO potential. So, and then the final thing is certainly like to see the city address the synchronization of lights downtown. It's still horrible. I was sitting in front of the hub 7 o'clock last night, heading west. The stoplight, light goes green. Next light, you can see it in the distance. It had gone to green. Oh, it wasn't traffic this time. It was a person with hitting the button so they could cross front. Of course, I've got to stop, and yet the furthest light also went green. It's horrible. I don't know who selected or checked the boxes and installed the stuff down there. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Donna. Okay, if you can pull the mic down just a little bit to you, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay. First of all, I just want to say, sitting through these meetings is sometimes like, I heard somebody say, watching paint dry. It's hard, it's painful, but I really appreciate that you guys are paying attention. This is money you're spending. This is our money. So I thank you for all the questions, as painful as they are. Anyway, my name is Donna Peterson. I am a city resident, and I'm here tonight to comment on the report of the findings and recommendations concerning the City of Port Angeles's management of the Senior Center and its relationship with the Senior Citizen Guiding Committee, submitted to the city manager by Jetta Rogers on April 23rd. From what I've asked, many of you may have not even ever seen this report, and it's now 3 months old. But first of all, I'll just act as though you did, and I have a copy of it, and I'll be happy to email you a copy of it if you haven't seen it. First of all, thank you. Thank you for listening to the many times my friends and I on the senior advocacy group have come to speak to you on this issue. We have been attending, if not in person, online, almost all of your meetings since June 4th of a year ago. In her fact-finding role in March, Ms. Rogers came to many groups at the Senior Center. The Roundtable on Politics and our advocacy group are two that she attended that I know of, to listen to our concerns about the center politics or policies. She was very open, she was very receptive, and it was the first time that many of us felt like we have ever been heard. We do have a few questions and concerns raised in her report. Specifically, what happens next? Who in the city is going to be overseeing the processes that she outlined in the report? What kind of timeline can we expect to see them implemented? In the report, she mentions many, many times stakeholders, but never once are senior center members mentioned. Are these two different things or one and the same thing? Members should definitely be included in the development of the policies, and we request that at least 2 members of the senior advocacy group be included on this committee. Previously, so much of the senior center policies have focused on discipline and punishment. We feel that there needs to be a senior center members' Bill of Rights, and we forwarded a copy to Ms. Rogers of one that's used in New York City. We hope that everybody working together would be for the common good instead of punishing. The most basic issue at the core of our problems is the conflict of roles and responsibilities between the city and the Senior Citizen Guiding Committee. Basically, who's in charge? I submit to you that the Port Angeles Municipal Code says the city is responsible, and as such, the Senior Citizen Guiding Committee may only advise and provide programs. The Senior Citizen Guiding Committee attorney recently, as of May 30th, once again refused a public records request. Sorry, I'm almost done. Another public records request claiming that as a 501c3 status, they're exempt from public records, open records. If this is in fact their position, that is even acknowledging that they have no right to govern. And it is clearly the city's job. You as council members must ensure that the city and the department heads are enforcing code and doing their job. Having said all that, I really do want to thank Ms. Rogers for her work and you for listening and hopefully encouraging everyone to move forward in a positive way.
Thank you. Thank you, Donna. Anyone else? All right, come on down. I don't have any hands online, so.
Mimi Smith, City of Port Angeles. Where do we sell our surplus equipment? Because I've been to all of the different online websites for auctions. I found Squim and I found Port Townsend. I never found Port Angeles. So I don't know where these things are listed. Next, I did talk to Kubota, and they said that that piece of equipment, the MX 5000, is good for at least 4,000 hours. 5 probably. A lot of them are running still at 10,000 hours. So to say, oh yeah, we have to spend $48,000 on a piece of equipment we've only used a third of its lifetime, that seems wasteful. Also, there are, I think, 3 other models that can be used that'll use all the other equipment that's still backward compatible with the equipment you have. Can we just get a cheaper piece of equipment and go through someone locally? I mean, I think that what I heard, if it was me, if this was my company, I'd say, you're not giving me a good enough reason to buy this piece of equipment other than just you want it. You have 2 pieces of equipment. One of them's only used a few hours a day during the summer months. And now you're going to use it for snow removal. You can use it for snow removal already. You know, the one you have. You're not using it to capacity. Moving it around town doesn't put any hours on it, and it doesn't injure it. I mean, you can load it on a truck and move it anywhere. If you were moving it physically around town, there'd be more hours on it. So I just think that this is, it's just spending other people's money. And unfortunately, those other people are the people of Port Angeles. I think it's a bad idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Mimi. Jared. Justin, sorry.
Hello, Justin Langston, city resident. I want to replace the Kubota with, say, a Ferrari. And let's say I purchase a Ferrari. And after I purchase that Ferrari, instead of using that Ferrari, I bring it out on the weekends and I use it for an hour driving on a Sunday. And I go Sunday driving with it. Well, after 20 years of driving only on the Sunday for an hour, is that Ferrari really old? Now that Ferrari, it's kind of become a collector's item because I've kept the mileage low as well. So 1,600 hours and 4,000 is really a low number for me as well. I would think 10, 20,000 hours would be something that we push for in the terms of our maintenance and how long we can get the use out of a vehicle. But go back to the Ferrari analogy for a second. If I was to get a Ferrari and I spent 100,000 over the course of 30 years driving that Ferrari or 20 years driving that Ferrari only on a Sunday, I'd not be feeling like I'd want to purchase another Ferrari because I definitely wouldn't be getting my money's worth out of that Ferrari. So to purchase a piece of equipment that's supposed to get 4,000 to 5,000 hours over the course of its lifetime and only used 1,600 hours over the course of 20 years and have an additional $30,000 put into it over the course of that 20 years after its purchase makes me feel like purchasing another vehicle for $50,000, even though that's the purchasing price. You're still going to put maintenance into that piece of equipment as well, and you're not going to use it anymore. So there's going to be maintenance costs to both of them. Now we're just purchasing brand new equipment, not to replace a piece of equipment that really doesn't have that high mileage on it anyway. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Justin. Anyone else? All right. Thank you. We'd have to vote to extend. So we will be adjourned. Thank you all. And we will hopefully see you next Tuesday, the 22nd, for a discussion about ecology and Rainier cleanup. Bye, Lindsay.